across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Hello and good morning to you. It is Friday. I am Alex Phillips and I'm going to be here with you until 1 o'clock today, bringing you news and views and trying to cast away some of those blues, although it really doesn't feel like we're in a good place as a nation, does it? I must admit, this whole debacle over visiting Maccabi Tel Aviv football fans has left me really quite disturbed. Not that I wasn't already, but it just crystallised the suspicions that I had that in this country, an increasingly aggressive, assertive Islamist movement is now becoming the tail that wags the dog. We're going to be digging into that, and don't you worry, I ain't going to hold back. But also, what is going on with the Labour Party? I've been saying for ages that they've got a China problem, right? This isn't something brand new that we've learned because, you know, they're fiddling around, legalising and lawyering, obfuscating and circumlocuting over what is going on in this country. They have been the lapdogs of Beijing from the beginning. That's right, you just have to look at the roll call of ministers who all flew out to China the minute they got their little red suitcases and took up positions in the Cabinet Office. That's where they all seemed to go. And good old Ed Miliband, of course, desperately needs China to make his wigwams and his solar panels. They've got themselves in a real mess, a Gordian knot. They're stuck now with a huge dependency on Beijing to make the things that they need. They've allowed China to invest places where Chinese money should never have gone. And now, frankly, if they don't appease the Chinese dragon, they're going to feel some fiery breath on their necks. And I think that this is probably fundamentally at the base of it. But the big question is, did Sir Keir Starmer lie to Parliament? He might not outright lie, but he does that lawyer thing, doesn't he? He pulls strings, uses forms of words, twists sentences, passes blame onto other people. I mean, he was a human rights lawyer, wasn't he? Which means that the worst of the worst, the scum of the world, he was able to stand up and defend them in court and lessen their sentences or get them off charges. And I'm afraid that is his mindset. That is why he is a useful patsy for his controllers, because that's what he does now, pointing the finger of blame at everyone else. It wasn't me. Oh, we did the right thing. It's always after the fact. It's always after the fact. He won't do something. He pushes up against something. As soon as he's caught with his pants down and people are like, we don't like this ideology, we don't agree with what you've done, it's everyone else's fault and not mine. I'm going to do an inquiry, I'm going to publish a report, and somebody else's neck is on the chopper. That's exactly what he's doing again now. And I just hope, frankly, that his web of lies starts to tie a little tight around him, because we can see what he is. You just have to look at the polling of the Labour Party now. They're now in third place on around 17%. In fact, they're being beaten by the other left-wing parties. So unpopular is he, because people know we're being led by a charlatan. Let's speak to James Price, former Conservative government advisor, my babber-in-chief, live from God's own county of Gloucestershire. Great to see you this morning, James.
Well, thank you very much for having me on. And I wish we could talk about the wonder that is the Gloucestershire Cotswolds countryside, but Labour are doing too many evil things to let us talk about that.
Aren't they just? Let's talk about what... It's very clear to me that the Labour Party have always been in bed with the Chinese Communist Party. They share a lot of ideology. But more than anything, they want the cheap Chinese yuan to provide them with their mad, self-flagellating left-wing net zero projects. They haven't been as resilient or as robust against China as well. Not that their predecessors really were particularly. America's very worried about this. There have been a number of social media posts over the last few days of America saying, are we in Five Eyes, or is it actually Six Eyes when it comes to the intelligence allegiance between the Anglophone states? And now you have the MI5 chief saying he is frustrated over the collapse of the China spy case, and yet there is Starmer still standing. Do you think he's going to be able to get away with this?
Well, I fear that he probably will, just because the attention span of too many in the lobby is so short. And it's these sorts of technical little rules that will allow a shameless little grubby lawyer like Starmer to get away with it. A more honourable person would have realised that what they're doing is completely dishonourable and would have fallen on their sword. But I don't think that Starmer will do that. And I think that because there's so many easy ways to go, oh, well, there was a letter here and there was a bit of advice there, and if you look at it halfway, it doesn't look so bad. No, there's forgetting all the wood for the trees. The fact of the matter is that an enemy state who means us an awful lot of ill, as a communist state will always wish ill to what is ostensibly a free country, has paid British traitors, frankly, to spy on, allegedly, let's say, to spy on members of our sovereign parliament, has bought up data centres to spy on our confidential state activities. Why is it doing that? Is it so it can better sell us nice electric cars or bits of plastic tat? No. It's because if and when there comes to some kind of great global conflict, they can knock us out of the game very quickly. The solar panels that they sell Europe are riddled with listening devices. I wouldn't be surprised if they're riddled with more.
Oh, they're riddled with kill switches as well, aren't they? They can essentially just turn off our solar farms at a whim, should they wish to.
Exactly right. And I think that we need to get a lot more real about this. The Treasury, which it sounds like has been involved in leaning on some of these entities in the rest of the state to drop this case, needs to start realising that we face real threats, not just the threats that the Treasury thinks that we can afford to face. And that's a crucial part of this.
Let's not forget, actually, ahead of the last budget over about a year ago, Rachel Reeves went over to China. What on earth was the Chancellor going to visit China before she could draw up the UK's budget? What's it got to do with Beijing? Jonathan Reynolds, the business secretary, he took a lovely little jaunt over to Beijing as well. In fact, it was Sir Keir Starmer's intention, and let's see if he still does it, to invite himself on a state visit there next year. It is very clear the Labour Party seem to have no issue with China. They love a bit of communism. They don't mind about destroying the West. In fact, it seems to be their want most of the time. And they know full well. And it's funny, isn't it, during this whole process, Ed Zero's in some sort of stationery cupboard, locked up and gagged. They're not letting him out to play, because I'd love to see the size of the bumper charity cheque he's sent over to President Xi in return for a load of wacko equipment that's probably, like you said, bugged for our own destruction. And then Jonathan Powell, we find out that the National Security Advisor, who again he's in some sort of stationery cupboard with Ed Miliband at the moment, was part of something called the 48 Club, which is sort of a hand-picked group of leaders who China seems to have a direct line to in order to spin their propaganda. I mean, when you look at it, this is utterly horrifying. This is not a friendly state. America is absolutely in a state of panic about this country's relationship with China. Starmer is doing his lawyering and his obfuscating. Nothing to see here, nothing to do with me, blaming everyone else but him. He doesn't care if other people's heads roll as long as his is saved. I'm blimmin' worried.
Yeah, you're right to be worried, and people at home should be a lot more worried than they actually are. China is a long, long way away, and therefore we don't feel that it's as immediate a threat as, let's say, Russia. And in one sense, that's true. But what is it that's enabled Russia to keep its own war machine going for as long as it has? It's been the support of China, and it was the, what's it called? The friendship that knows no limits between Russia and China, and I would throw Iran into the mix on that as well.
Right, you've got the crinklies, haven't you, basically? You've got China, Russia, Iran, North Korea.
Yeah, exactly. Chuck Little Rocket Man in there as well.
Oh, Little Rocket, don't forget him.
This is the axis of evil that we face, and they're all working in alliance with one another. And we have a choice to make, and we can choose to say, do you know what? China is so big and powerful and so rich that we're not going to go up against it, and we're not like we're in much of a military position to defend Ukraine or Taiwan or anywhere else anyway. So we could, there is an argument that says it's not our fight. Let America fight that out. We'll get flooded with loads of good cheap Chinese kit, and the quid pro quo will be we are defenseless against them and become a sort of outer satrapy of the Chinese. We could do that. The alternative is that we get serious about defending ourselves, that we strip engagement out from their companies that only come over here, frankly, to steal industrial secrets and corporate secrets from us. They've done that, you'll see, with high-speed rail, all those German companies that thought, goody, we're going to have all these sweet deals to build rail in China. Well, they went and did it for a bit. The Chinese looked at it, worked out they could copy it, and then got rid of them. And now those companies are going to go bust over there.
This is the thing, actually. We have allowed China to gain an economic dominance over us. We didn't need to be buying solar panels and wind turbines from them at all. I know they make them on the dead cheap, but they do them by pumping out a load of CO2, by having coal-fired power stations and using slave labour. We didn't need to pursue this mad, economically destructive deindustrialisation strategy of net zero. We could have just got stuff out the North Sea. We didn't need to say to China, oh, because you can build things cheap, do you fancy in on our mobile phone networks and our railways and all of our utilities and our nuclear power stations? We didn't need to do that. But it's not just the Labour government who have done this, I'm afraid to say. It is previous Conservative governments. It all started with Osborne and Cameron, who basically just went over to China and go, yeah, we need to make a bit of cash money. What do you want to buy? Boris Johnson, when he was Prime Minister, was warned by the intelligence agencies about China. And the day that a Five Eyes report landed on his desk saying, do not allow them in to develop 5G, he signed the contract with Huawei, which then later had to be rescinded. So there's been a whole lot of guanxi, the Chinese building of networks, in successive governments now, and very few people with the courage and the logic to stand up against this. Now, one of those people who I've admired for a very long time for this reason, particularly when he used to be head of the Foreign Affairs Committee, was Tom Tugendhat, and he's been quite rightly standing up and making quite strident statements in the Commons. Let's have a listen.
My home has been broken into, my files have been ransacked, somebody has been put in my office by a hostile state, and two parties are playing politics with it. Yeah. This is national security of the United Kingdom, and yet here we have two individuals seeking to extract information from us. Yeah. And the government's response is not, as mine was, do everything you can to make sure the prosecution works, but no, process. Well, who the hell's side are you on? This isn't about the bureaucracy, this is about leadership. We're not sent here to be civil servants, we're sent here to lead the country and to make decisions.
Get in there, Tom, that's my boy. Go on, son. But he's absolutely right. When he asks the question, James, whose side are you on? It seems to me it's never the side of Britain.
No, you're dead right. And I'm afraid that is the case with a lot of our enemies. You know, you mentioned about this horrible decision in Birmingham about not letting Jews in to come and watch a football match. Whose side are you on? People, older viewers and listeners will remember that question in the 1970s, you know, who governs Britain? I think the question these days is, as you say, in whose interest is Britain being governed? And our enemies are, unfortunately, quite smart. They know that we have tied ourselves in bureaucracy. The blob is very powerful now. We've tied ourselves in process and all these things, and they managed to exploit these very cleverly. So you can't get rid of Islamists because, oh, you might have to do the same thing to Christians. You can't get rid of evil Chinese companies because you might have to do the same to impressive, friendly American ones. No, that kind of like dead behind the eyes liberalism has to stop, and we've got to get real. For the last 30 odd years, we've lived in this cute little post-First Cold War bubble and think, oh, it's great, we don't have to spend money on defense or on spies or anything. We can spaff it up the wall on endless benefits that mean that 5,000 people a day are signing on. No more. I'm afraid to tell people, and sorry to ruin your Fridays, that we are in Cold War 2, as the historian Neil Ferguson has put it.
I don't think Cold War 1 ever ended.
Game over.
Frankly, Cold War 1 never even ended. We just dozed off to sleep thinking it was all right. But the problem with communists, because they don't have much democracy, is they make very long-term plans indeed. And some of those long-term plans are beginning to come to fruition. Now, on the subject of the Cold War never ending, good on Nigel Farage coming out, doing an interview with Michelle Hussein for Bloomberg, and being quite clear on his position on Russia. And what's quite impressive about the way he's tackled this is everyone's almost been forced to play that clip of when he said, who is the person you admire the most? Vladimir Putin. But they've been forced essentially to play it in full, where he says, he's really not a good person. He's a dreadful character. He terrifies me. But he is someone who knows how to politically manoeuvre. That he does. He's one of the only people who seems to be running rings around Donald Trump. But Farage has gone further, saying that if he were Prime Minister, he would shoot Russian jets down in NATO airspace. When asked, well, if they encroach upon our territory, in our skies, what should you do? Shoot them down. He's said that Putin is a very bad dude. He wants to see Trump now take a tougher stance against Russia. All of the sort of nonsense nonsense, the sort of Carol Cadwallader rubbish about, oh, it's Russia, Russia funded Brexit, oh, look at all the ties between Russia and you. They always do that, the leftists. Everything, oh, it must be Russia. How did Donald Trump get elected? Oh, it's got to be Russia. I'm afraid you want to see who the communists are mates with, sunshine. It's the left wing. But no, I'd say good on him for doing this. And it's important, actually, that the country does know these things, because looking at the polling, he could well end up as our next Prime Minister.
Yeah, I think this is a really grown-up, mature and encouraging move from Nigel Farage. He's obviously right on a lot of domestic issues and has been proven right on them. But when it comes to foreign affairs, he's been, if I may say, a little wobbly, other than with Brexit and with America, where I think that he's right on both of those, where he's I think, flirted with this kind of slightly cranky idea that it was NATO expansion that is the real reason why there's Russian aggression. I'm sorry, no. We don't believe in spheres of influence. If Estonia and Latvia and Lithuania and even Ukraine want to join NATO and NATO wants them to join as well, that's got no business of Russia in there. That is about the same kind of defence deal that the rest of NATO has and other partnerships around the world have, and we need to show strength. And it's great that Farage is saying this. I think he addressed the issue of that ghastly little man who did some kind of spying for Russia as well, and he was quite categorical in saying that's the only sort of Russian sympathiser that's ever kicking around reform. Now, he may get hoisted on that pledge, but I hope it's true, because it would be very bad otherwise. But I think having a strong, robust line on foreign affairs, that Britain is not the evil actor that the left in this country thinks that it is, that we are one of the most moral and best countries in the world, that we should project power and strength and influence, which we can only do, by the way, if we rebuild our armed forces and we do it in a smart way with new technologies and we sort our own intelligence issues out. But this is really encouraging that Reform is starting to say these sorts of things, especially when, and I might get in a bit of trouble for saying this, the shadow foreign secretary is too busy still trying to defend the so-called Boris wave. So I think we need to be real about this. And when Starmer goes around kowtowing and recognising fictional states in the Middle East to appease Hamas, I think we definitely need some leadership when it comes to foreign policy that's been lacking for far too long.
Make the West great again. I think that's what America certainly wants Europe to do. James,
now we're talking. First, make the West Country great.
Make the West Country great again. That's what we're doing, you and I. We're building a Brexit enclave deep in the heart of the Cotswolds. Come one, come all, as long as you're of the right mindset. OK, thank you ever so much. The wonderful James Price, their former Conservative government advisor. We're going to take a short break now, but coming up after the break, I'm going to have to let off a bit of steam, because I'm not happy with what's going on at Aston Villa. I'm not happy with the West Midlands Police. I'm not happy at all with some of these disgusting Islamist sectarian MPs we have elected to our parliament. And I'm not just unhappy, there's a chill that runs down my spine. I'm going to be giving it both barrels after this.
did they politically assassinate me in the most unchristian and clumsy and unfair way? I don't even have to ask them that. You know, that's going to be played out in court. That's not going to drop. But look, at the end of the day, that's history. They decided to do that. It was a surprise to me. I don't understand it. And as I said, I played a big part in achieving what we collectively achieved. And many of us carried it on while Nigel left the field to make money.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
You know, folks, this is how it begins. The idea that you cannot have football fans from Israel coming to Birmingham for their own safety. These are the grievance politics and the narratives of the Islamists. Because when you look at the decision taken to ban away fans from going to Aston Villa, the supporters of Maccabi Tel Aviv, when you look at the provenance of that and realise it is a petition from an Islamist MP who thanks everybody for the support that he has got in making sure that these people are not welcome in Birmingham, when you look at the other independent Muslim vote MPs who aren't even trying to cover up the fact that they, frankly, despise Jews, then you have to worry. You have to worry that the West Midlands Police Force caved to this. You have to worry when you look at the demographics of Birmingham, 30% of whom, at least, are practising Muslims, that really what is going on in our second city, what is going on in towns and cities around the country, when the tail is wagging the dog, when an increasingly assertive, aggressive, barbaric, medieval ideology is making demands as if they run the place. It is not your country. You may live here, but you do not get to call the shots. And yet, they are. Look at this clip of a Muslim cleric in Birmingham.
We safeguard the vulnerable from any type of exploitation. That is the character of a Muslim, who has a Muslim as a rahmah. This, remember, rahmah is in its place. It's in its place. When the Tel Aviv fans come to Birmingham in a few weeks, we will not show them rahmah in Birmingham.
So there he is, essentially putting it to some sort of Islamic statute in Birmingham that when the Tel Aviv football fans come, they are not shown mercy. And yet you've got a load of random apologists suggesting that actually it must be these football fans who are visiting, who are the marauders, who are the dangers, who are genocidal terrorists, who say what happened a year ago in Amsterdam was the fault of hooliganism. It was not. There were Jew-hating groups among the Arabs, among the North Africans, among the Muslim population of the Netherlands who were actively trying to hunt down those football supporters. And I will tell you again, this is how it begins, folks, because it starts with these people coming for the Jews, and the next it will be the homosexuals, and it will be the women, and it will then be you. When these medieval, disgusting Islamists think that they can get away with making threats, calling the shots, they're so emboldened now. They're so emboldened because of the weakness of our political establishment, allowing these hate marches to take place every single week. In recognising the state of Palestine to appease Hamas. They're so emboldened now they're not even trying to cover it up anymore. And what scares me is when our politicians and our police forces are allowing it to happen. They're cowards. But what lies in wait is pretty frightening. Let's speak now to Fleur Hassan-Nahum, Israeli Foreign Ministry Special Envoy, former Deputy Mayor of Jerusalem. Fleur, what is your reaction as you look at Britain and you look at this decision that has been taken? You must be utterly, utterly horrified, but probably, unfortunately, not very surprised.
Unfortunately, this is what it comes to when people say, well, it starts with the little things. It really does start with the little things, and then it snowballs into this. And Alex, you said it exactly right. This is where things start. But let me tell you the way I see it is, it's not that the police can't assure the security, it's that they won't assure the security. Now, imagine this was another group. Imagine this was another nation. Imagine this was an African football team, and they're saying, no, we can't assure the security. Somebody would be outraged at this and would be calling it racism. But because it's Israel and because it's Jews, then there are genuine concerns. But let me tell you something else. The worst thing is how disingenuous this Ayub Khan is. He's saying, we signed a petition because we don't want them here. Oh, and it's for security. Well, what is it? Is it security, or is it because you just don't want Jews in the city that you now have essentially taken over? And again, this is how it starts. And I hate making comparisons with Nazi Germany, but in 1933, Jews started being excluded from public spaces, from German public events. And that's how it started. And then it took another 7 years to get to the atrocities. But that's how it started.
Indeed it is. And it's the disgusting, vile cocktail of the far left with Islamists, which again is exactly what happened in Hitler's Germany. And the problem is, Ayub Khan is one thing when he suggests that, oh, well, it's for the safety. And well done to all of those who signed his petition. Woohoo! There he is, popping his non-alcoholic bottle of elderflower water or something. But you just have to look at what his fellow colleagues, the Muslim Vote colleagues, are also saying. You have Zara Sultana, who is now calling for a ban on all Israeli sports people in any single event. In all of them. And then this one is probably the most disgusting, Iqbal Mohammed, and I will read exactly what he's put on Twitter so as not to be libelled, because these are his words. Thank you all who put the safety of Aston Villa fans, Birmingham residents and the British public above the Zionists and political pressure to let Israeli hooligans and terrorists run riot in our country. I mean, there he is suggesting...
Gaslighting 101.
It's disgusting.
They're supporting terrorists. They're calling for globalizing the Intifada. They're calling for death to Jews. And then they're accusing us of being the hooligans. For God's sake, they're just fans who want to support their team. In Amsterdam, it was a pogrom.
It was a pogrom.
That was deliberately planned. And how dare they say that they are concerned by the security? They should be concerned by their own security. Listen, if an Israeli never steps in Birmingham has a lot of problems with security.
Could you imagine?
Nothing to do with us. Nothing to do with us.
Birmingham's gone. Build a wall around it at this point. But like you said, Fleur, quite rightly so, if this was anybody else, say if this was a sort of a Saudi Arabian football team coming over and there was a load of white skinheads saying we don't want Arabs in the country, and then they said to the Arab fans, you can't come. Can you imagine? There'd be people being thrown in prison right now.
Absolutely.
Without mercy, to use the words of that disgusting imam. Fleur, thank you ever so much for coming on the programme. And I just apologise to all Israelis for the state of our country and what's going on here, because not in my name. This is not my Britain. And it's not yours either, I know. OK, shall we take a short break now? I think we do need to have a breather. But when we come back, we're going to be re-examining what is going on in the China spy case with the co-founder of the Inter-Parliamentary Alliance on China. Stay tuned.
across the UK. On DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Hello. There I am. Hello. Welcome back to the show. I felt like I don't know, I got lost in a sort of mini time warp then. Maybe a UAP had come and dragged me up and done some examinations on my skull and put me back down in the seat. Anyway, welcome back to the show. Let's go back through what is going on with Starmer and China. Because it's a bit he said, she said, their fault, my fault, the last government's fault. Everything's the last government's fault. Remember that. Nothing is the Labour Party's fault. It's all because of the Conservative Party. I'm not sure how many more times you can play that particular record. But what is quite clear to me is there is an interconnected interdependence, a parasitic relationship between China and the Labour Party. At the very least, the number of ministerial visits that have already taken place within 1 year of being in power shows you enough that the Labour Party are pretty much enthralled to the magic of Mr. Xi Jinping, all the wonderful things he can offer them at cut price deals. I think they've become so entrenched with China that actually upsetting their mates over in the Communist Party could land them in some hot water. And so lily-livered and weak as they are, and also, frankly, they don't care about the West, they're doing everything they can to make sure that they do not displease the Chinese Communist Party. But who did put the bit of government advice, the direct citation from the Labour Party manifesto, in that recommendation? Who was responsible? Was it the CPS? Are they the ones being weak? Did they have enough to go on to actually continue this case? Was it deliberately collapsed by the Labour Party? Was it someone in the Labour Party who said to the Deputy National Security Advisor, well, OK, you can say that we're a bit worried about China, but you've got to measure it with this, that we're going to work with them where we can. I mean, who is it? Whose agenda is this to appease Beijing? Let's speak now to Luke de Polford, co-founder of the Interparliamentary Alliance on China. I mean, whose is it? That's the big question, isn't it, Luke? Who is the one who's trying to, do handstands and cartwheels to make sure the Communist Party in Beijing aren't upset?
Well, look, I think when we finally know the truth and when everybody has had to answer questions about this story will be written with a title, and it'll be something like willy-waving, cock up and cover up, because everybody has made mistakes here, and not just mistakes. I think they're quite deliberate mistakes on the part of the government. When it comes to the cover up, it seems quite clear to me that the Deputy National Security Advisor was asked to include statements that ended up softening the evidence that he provided to the Crown Prosecution Service. I can't see any way around that. The idea that he acted completely on his own, with no reference to his boss or anybody else, is really ludicrous, especially given that it was his job to represent the view of the government. The Crown Prosecution Service itself has got questions to answer, because they didn't proceed with a case where it seems to everybody looking at it there was ample evidence. The Crown Prosecution Service had prosecuted cases before that had a higher threshold around defining an enemy for the purposes of the Official Secrets Act. They'd done it before with a higher threshold. Why couldn't they proceed with this one? I think there are real questions to answer there. And it feels to me that there's been some institutional jockeying as well, some kind of toing and froing between the government and between the CPS over all of this, about removal of certain pieces of evidence, about inclusion of certain pieces of evidence. So I think everybody has serious questions to answer here. The really worrying thing is that when the Prime Minister came to the House of Commons, he gave two cast iron commitments. He said, one, the Labour Party's policy had nothing to do with any of this. It was all about the previous government, in which case, why are there paragraphs from the Labour Party manifesto in the evidence? Secondly, he said the Deputy National Security Advisor acted totally on his own. And I don't know if that's going to hold true after the weekend.
Well, why was he acting completely? I mean, like you said, it just doesn't stand up. It doesn't meet his credibility, because where's the National Security Advisor in all of this? Can anybody explain why so many Labour ministers have taken an aeroplane over to Beijing? It's good to see that MI5 are sort of quite prudently and pragmatically playing their own part, even talking about how they even very recently thwarted a Chinese Chinese plot to attack Britain's national security just last week. You've had former Director of Communications for Number 10, Dominic Cummings, lifting the lid on quite how the Chinese Communist Party, Chinese spies, were able to penetrate what should have been a secure messaging system used at the very top of government. We've then also heard that the big mega embassy they're planning to build just the other side of the River Thames, they actually intend on turning into essentially a big Chinese spy centre. And yet, it seems to me this government are not just spineless, but totally unable to do anything about it, because by this point, they're already too embedded. That if suddenly they had to extract, if China were to be vengeful in the wake of this prosecution and decide to start, I don't know, not selling us windmills and not selling us solar panels and pulling themselves out of all their investments, or indeed even just flicking the kill switches on the solar farms that already exist here, that we're stuck between a rock and a hard place. We've cozied up to them too much already.
Well, I've been arguing for years now that we should audit and reduce our dependence on China. But the truth is, we're not actually in as bad a position as many other countries. The UK still has, by the way, a £40 billion deficit in trade with China. They export way more to us. And, by the way, it's often forgotten that they don't really do foreign direct investment anymore. This dropped off a cliff from China in 2017. So this kind of dogma within the Treasury that we have to tithe ourselves to the Chinese economy or we're going to be ruined isn't actually based in much evidence. So I think it's important for us to say that, because this whole dichotomy between national security and economic prosperity is a false one. I also want to raise something that's just happened now. The Chinese government has just attacked and threatened the UK over the embassy delay. It was delayed again, as you've reported. And what they've said is that the UK will face the consequences. But buried in this statement is something very interesting. They say the UK must fulfill its commitments and obligations. The commitments word is incredibly important because, as you know, with a called-in application like this, a planning application, the UK government cannot have a view. It cannot give any commitments. But it was reported last week that assurances had been given to the Chinese that they would get their embassy. Such assurances would be unlawful.
By whom?
Well, by the UK government, by various parts of the UK government, probably the Foreign Office. We don't know. But what's so interesting is that journalists have been digging around this for a while, trying to say, have you given the Chinese assurances you're going to get your embassy? Because that wouldn't be lawful. And today, in the spokesperson's statement for the Ministry of Foreign Affairs China, you have him saying, you must stand by your commitments. This is going to be a huge story, because if there were commitments made, they would be unlawful and they're not getting their embassy.
Well, I think it seems to me quite logical that the Labour Party and the Labour government have probably made promises to Beijing. I mean, you can't just keep flying ministers over there. What on earth was Rachel Reeves doing flying over there as Chancellor before the last budget? Did she have to get a Chinese calculator specially made so she could make her sums add up? Jonathan Reynolds, the business secretary, he's been hanging out over there. Sir Keir Starmer himself had the intention of going on a state visit to China. Indeed, it does say in their manifesto, they put in the checks and balances of we're going to take precautions and so on and so forth. But they very much want to work in China. Ed Miliband especially can't get enough of the net zero stuff. And herein lies our issue. Herein lies our issue that clearly they have made some commitments on these trips. We don't know what was said on those trips. We didn't really ask the questions back then of why so many people were going over to China. And it seems to me now America especially is incredibly worried about our relationship in China.
Yeah, well, that's a real worry, because obviously if you frame this kind of thing between China and the US in terms of great power competition, the UK is going to have to pick a side, and it will not be able to play both sides. Beijing is not going to tolerate that. One thing I'd say to your points before, it's often overlooked that it is an explicit policy of the Chinese Communist Party to make other countries dependent upon it. Xi Jinping himself in 2020 said that they wanted to mount deterrence and counterattack, this is a quote, deterrence and counterattack against other countries by fostering total dominance in what he called killer industries to make other countries more dependent on China. Could we have walked more obviously into the trap? I mean, it's not as if this is even a secret They are trying to inculcate dependency, so countries are over a barrel, so they do not have the ability to stand up for their values and national security. And we're seeing that play out in real time now in this mess that the government is facing.
We are indeed, and I'm just looking forward to the sort of Damocles to come crashing down on somebody, although I just have this feeling that these governments are like Teflon. Luke, thank you ever so much. Brilliant analysis there. Luke de Pulford, co-founder of the Interparliamentary Alliance on China. Taking a short break now, but after that you'll be delighted to know that one of my favourite women of all time is going to be joining me on the show. She's one of my besties. She is Samara Gill. She's a sort of new up-and-coming talk presenter, that's right. They've let her out of the gallery and they stuck her behind the desk, and my word, isn't she doing brilliant work. She's incredible. She's up after this.
Why did they politically assassinate me in the most unchristian and clumsy and unfair way? I don't even have to ask them that. You know, that's going to be played out in court. That's not going to drop. But look, at the end of the day, that's history. They decided to do that. It was a surprise to me. I don't understand it. And as I said, I played a big part in achieving what we collectively achieved. And many of us carried it on while Nigel left the field to make money.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Hello, welcome back. A bit of breaking news for you now. The broadcasting watchdog Ofcom has sanctioned the BBC for breaching its broadcasting code. And this is all about that, I'm going to do, for those people who are listening, floating air quotations, the documentary, Gaza, How to Survive a War Zone. Because, of course, the little kiddie they had running around being the narrator, pulling on our heartstrings, telling us how terrible everything is over there, is the son of a Hamas operative. And the BBC didn't disclose this, and so they are now being sanctioned by the broadcasting watchdog Ofcom. Yabu sucks. Right, okay. Without further ado, let's welcome her on to the show. She's amazing. I adore her. I love every single cell in that woman's body. It is Samara Gill. Hi, Samara.
Hi, great to be with you, Alex.
Nice to have you on board. Now, talking about welcome on board HMS Common Sense, Sadiq Khan has been having a good old time, hasn't he? Because he's been on a super yacht with a man whose nickname is The Tash with the Cash, who is a Pakistani-American businessman who's got a fair whack of cash money, to say the least, owns lots of stuff, including Fulham, apparently. But he bought his super yacht, the 122-metre Kismet, which has got a nightclub, a swimming pool, a submarine, a gym, 36 crew members, a helipad, a sauna. You can charter it for a cool £2.6 million a week. We parked this thing up in London so our very own lovely mayor could have a shindig for his 55th. Oh, how lovely for Sadiq Khan to go and be on a super yacht in the middle of London while the rest of us get stabbed up and have our phones nicked and live in misery in the capital city.
Well, exactly. And I wonder if that yacht paid any ULEZ like everyone else, all the nurses, teachers and doctors that try and get to work and get slammed with a £12.50 additional fee because apparently they're guzzling too much diesel and petrol and it's polluting the air. I do wonder if that yacht-bearing billionaire got charged with the same amount. I mean, you're completely right. The next time you kind of get your phone nicked, you might get side-stabbed in London, you might choke on the horrendous air on the tube, you might get your phone, your watch swiped. It's just ridiculous. I mean, rest assured that Champagne's socialist mayor, Sadiq Khan, will be resting easy in his 268-metre super yacht, sanctioned by this billionaire. Now, I have got some real questions, Alex, as to what's even going on here with this friendship. Now, I'm not trying to accuse anyone of anything. It's not illegal to have your 55th birthday hosted on a yacht, but a lot of billionaires don't offer free lunches. There is that saying, no such thing as a free lunch. And I think that rings true here. I mean, Sadiq Khan genuinely has a lot of power, unfortunately. He holds the keys to the city. And while I'm not alleging anything, I am wondering, you know, what's going on.
Right, what is up for sale, you might be questioning, and indeed I think it's a sensible question to ask. But it's, you know, Sadiq Khan isn't the first one to be living it large on the handouts of some of the Labour Party's mates. Of course, you know, this geezer, Shahid Khan, comes in the wake of Lord Ali, who seems to be the greatest benefactor of clothes and glasses and all sorts. Do you remember at the start of the premiership of Sir Keir Starmer, everyone seems to be off to blimmin' Taylor Swift concerts every 5 seconds, football matches, private boxes, nightclubs, special holidays. I mean, these champagne socialists love it when the people receiving the gifts and living the high life are them, but then they pretend they're man of the people and point the finger at everybody else for being against the common person.
There's nothing a socialist loves more than an expense account. I mean, that is common law over in Westminster, and it is true. I mean, even just think of Lord Mandelson. That's someone who loved to hang out with billionaires and loved to go on their yachts, on their islands, etc., and sort of hang around with the rich and famous based on their status. I mean, this is Sadiq Khan, someone who drives around in a motorcade of Range Rovers because he claims that London is too unsafe for him, and he's got so many threats because he's a Muslim mayor who's highly vilified. Well, how about London being unsafe for us, Sadiq, under your terrible, terrible shambolic reign? I mean, this is someone who is a hypocrite to the hilt. And I frankly had enough of his hypocrisy. He loves living the high life. He loves feeling safe and secure in our own city where no one feels safe and no one feels affluent.
Oh, he knows what he's doing, that when he knows what he's doing. And I'm actually, one of the first decent things or half-decent things that I've seen Sir Keir Starmer do is actually condemn Sadiq Khan's position on these pro-Palestine marchers shouting from the river to the sea and saying, well, actually, Sadiq is wrong on this. That is anti-Semitic. Of course it's anti-Semitic. anti-Semitic. It is calling for the destruction of the whole of Israel. But he plays a very clever game, doesn't he? Always, Khan. You saw this when Susan Hall, the leader of the Conservative group in the London Assembly, asked him about whether there is grooming gangs in London. Yes. We know there is. There's been a huge expose as to quite the shape and the colour of these grooming gangs, and they're absolutely horrifying. It is dreadful when you read about what's going on in our capital city. And yet he plays that game, doesn't he? He ducks and he dives and plays the grievance card, as they all like to do, by trying to make Susan Hall say, don't know what you're talking about. Are you going to have to use different language? Who are you talking about? What are you inferring? Just so he can turn around and go, you're a racist. It's because I'm a Muslim. You're Islamophobic. This is exactly the playbook of the lot of them. And he knows what he's doing.
He really does. And I think it's sort of this very insidious thing and sort of character trait that he has. We know that he can get things done. When you see how he comes after people who don't pay their ULEZ, who don't pay all these different climate taxes that he's put in place because he's a climate worshipper as well as many other things, you can see that he can come down hard. But apparently he can't come down hard on people who are, you know, doing drugs on the streets, stabbing people, nicking phones. We had 80,000 phones nicked in our central city this year. And he's got a very important job as the sort of gatekeeper of one of the best cities in the world, or formerly one of the best cities in the world. And you know it's a problem when you have tourists from all around the world saying, oh, I think I skipped London because it's a little bit unsafe. I don't want to get my phone nicked. I've heard this and that. I mean, this man is really presiding over the death of our capital city, and he should be held to account for it. But you're right, Alex. He never does. He dives and ducks. He hides behind all these different limitations. He hides behind who he is, what he looks like. And really, that's not the problem. We've elected him as the mayor of our city. There's clearly not racism within London. The issue is that he's incompetent, and he hides behind that. He hides behind his incompetence as some sort of veil for the fact that he can't get it together as our mayor.
Oh, see, I kind of think actually he's not incompetent. That's what scares me. I think he's quite devious, quite cunning, and quite willful. I think he just literally does not like the British people or have our interests at heart at all. But it's indicative of what is going on in this country. You know, we talk about the lawlessness of London, but increasingly in the United Kingdom, the offenders are the ones who are left off, and it's the innocent, it's the victims, it's the rest of the population who all have to bend to appease them. I think about things like mobile phone theft, and we're all told now not to get our phones out in public. I think of the sort of epidemic of shoplifting, and now you've got security tags on meat. I think of all the illegal immigration, and that can carry on, but then the rest of us all have to have identity cards. I think about what has gone on in Birmingham with the rise of toxic, cancerous Islamism now dictating who can and who can't enter the city. And instead of saying, no, actually, these people are the problem, the Islamists need to watch their step and learn to integrate, and we'll come down on them like a ton of bricks if they bring their anti-Semitism into this country. Instead, no, the visiting Jewish football fans aren't allowed to come. Instead of actually going after the offenders, we seem to, the rest of the country is being made to do handstands and cartwheels and bend over backwards to accommodate them.
Yeah, you're completely right, Alex. And it's a really, really dangerous path that we're going down here. I mean, it genuinely rings of a 1930s Germany-esque type of rhetoric that is being spouted, because there is this thing of, let's just deflect, let's blame something else, let's blame their safety, let's say that they're unsafe and that we can't protect them. That's just not true. It's veiled anti-Semitism that's happening when we talk about, you know, in regards to what's going on with Aston Villa. And I just really get scared when this rhetoric is thrown around so freely, and also when you see so much public support behind it. I mean, these are MPs, for Christ's sake, saying that we should ban Jews from certain sporting events. These are people that are representing our country, or meant to be, and I just think that it's a slippery slope. Once we start banning Jews from, you know, football events, where else are we going to ban them for? Right. Under this veil of their safety? It's nothing about that, and it's all about pure Jew hatred.
Yeah. We're normalising Islamism, essentially. We're actually letting these people get away with implanting and promoting their toxic ideology here on the streets of Britain. Samara, my darling, thank you ever so much for coming on the programme. It's always wonderful to catch up with the gorgeous, brilliant, inimitable Samara Gill. Now, I'm going to take a short break, but if you want to be cheered up, well, I don't know, maybe don't stay tuned in, but do stay tuned in, because we're in it together. It's a therapy. It is communal catharsis, because we're going to be talking about how much Rachel Reeves is going to be destroying the economy in the forthcoming budget. Woohoo! Can't wait! That's after this.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Hello there, welcome back to the show. It is Friday. I'm Alex Phillips. I'm going to be with you until 1 o'clock, as per usual. If you're not here every week with me, where are you? What better things have you got to do with your Friday? Well, go to work, look after your kids. No, that's not good enough. I demand your attention. I demand your presence. No, I don't. It's fine, but it's lovely to have your company. It is an honour and a privilege to have you tuned in. And I do mean you, specifically you, because I know that you're a loyal listener, and don't think it goes unnoticed. We all appreciate you so very much. Right, okay, now if we haven't had enough doom and gloom talking about, I mean, I was just looking at some of the headlines, right, on other news channels, and I just looked at one on Sky saying Israeli fan ban, and you know, when you see it written like that, you suddenly realise this is like living in 1930s Germany. We should all be blimmin' afraid, quite frankly, at the fact that that's even a headline in Britain in 2025, and also how quickly this has all happened. How quickly we seem to have descended into becoming a country that appeases anti-Semitic Islamism. Again, Islamism. different from Islam. Let me make that very clear. But unless we can have a conversation about this, and it's funny that none of them seem to be able to call it out. Oh, Sir Keir Starmer said it was a bad decision. We don't welcome anti-Semitism. It would do something about it. You're the Prime Minister. Use your big boy words. Huh? Why don't you turn around and call those Muslim vote MPs who have been behind this position, saying disgusting things on social media, call them out. You seem to be capable of flapping your lips when it comes to how much you dislike Nigel Farage and Reform UK. Funny, you don't seem to have much mettle or much spine when it comes to talking about the toxic, misogynistic, backwards, alien views of other members of Parliament. How about you learn to say what it is? Because unless we start doing that as a country, unless we can actually turn around and say, guess what, we've imported ideologies into Britain that are nothing to do with our democratic, liberal, Western, Judeo-Christian viewpoints, and they are not welcome here. Unless we make that very clear, this is going to continue. They're going to get more assertive. They're going to demand even more. This is how it starts. And we don't want to have to wait to learn how it will end, do we? Something else I think we don't want to learn how it's going to end is the forthcoming budget, which of course has been pushed back as far as possible because, I don't know, maybe Diane Abbott's abacus wasn't coming up with the correct calculations on the Treasurer's ledger. But everyone's now speculating about what Rachel Reeves would do. And in the few interviews, she's sort of suggesting, well, I said we wouldn't do a tax on working people, but I always said I'd stay within the confines of, you know, fiscal probity, that I would always make sure that we didn't get into toxic, oh, it's all the previous government's fault, I'm still having to clean up their mess. But it seems to me now that she's gone over to a big meeting of the International Monetary Fund. Remember, by the way, that the new person advising Sir Keir Starmer at the heart of 10 Downing Street ahead of this budget is the former director of the International Monetary Fund. They're all in it together, OK? Make no mistake, they're all in it together. But anyway, her comments on the fringes of the IMF's annual meeting in Washington has got people scared that there will be taxes placed on something. Because she needs more cash money, doesn't she? But she doesn't want to tax the things that are going to destabilise growth. No, not like when she put up employers' national insurance, which has pretty much tanked certain sectors of the economy and made things incredibly difficult, not just in things like hospitality and small and medium-sized enterprises, but in the care sector, for crying out loud. But no, now she's got to go after something else, so property, pensions and savings could all be targeted. Let's speak now to Mark Littlewood, Director of Popular Conservatism. He was, of course, formerly the head of the IEA as well. Mark, great to have you back on the show.
Hi, Alex.
Rachel Reeves, what sort of horrible myxomatosis-ridden rabbit is going to come out of her hat?
Yeah, it's hard to say, really, but it's going to be grim. Whatever type of rabbit it is. She's boxed herself in. She has no room for manoeuvre. She did say after her last budget that she had stabilised the economy and would not need to come back for more. Well, that has proven to be false. She is bound to come back for more. She said that those with the broadest shoulders can expect to have the largest burden put on them. But here's the bad news, Alex. Those with the broadest shoulders have left. Vast numbers of millionaires and the ultra rich are leaving the country. We haven't treated them very well either culturally, I think. You know, we consider them just to be cash cows rather than valuable parts of the British economy. And we haven't treated them well for tax purposes. So the number of people who are now leaving affluent parts of the UK and going to Dubai, Singapore, Monaco, Italy even is pretty big. So I'm afraid it's going to be well, you look quite shoulder padded up, actually, Alex. Maybe you've got fairly broad shoulders. I haven't, but it's going to be put on the shoulders of people like you and me.
Well, this is my worry, because I ain't got two pennies to rub together. I've only just got on the housing ladder at the grand old age of 41, almost 42, and I don't even have a blimmin' pension because I'm a freelancer. I'm going to be living under a motorway bridge with cats in my hijab. When I'm 70 years old. I can't wait. But, you know, talking about the capital flight out of London, this year alone, 12,500 millionaires have left London. The year before, it was 10,000 millionaires. That's money literally just rinsing out of the exchequer. These are the people who pay most of the taxes. And what people fail to understand is even if you put a flat 10% tax on everybody, the millionaire is paying a lot more money than the person who's on 20k. But the problem is she is clearly going after something. There are various things floating around that people are worried about. One of them is looking into capital gains again. The suggestion that capital gains tax could be increased, or there would be no exemption on a primary residence. If you're selling a property that in theory you live in and it's your primary residence, which at the moment you don't have to pay capital gains on, she might seek to add that. There's been a suggestion of there being an annual tax on multi-million-pound properties. If you happen to own a place, you might not have much expendable income, but if your property value, due to there being a crisis in the housing market and a rise in demand over the years, it's now worth a certain amount of money, they might come after you and go, right, you've got to pay an annual tax on that. And then they might even look at taxing pensions. I mean, look, if it is those things, I'm going to sit there and go, right, yeah, none of it comes to me, Mark. I haven't got any assets. But it seems to be assets that she's going to target.
Yes, I think that's right. And I've probably got particularly bad news for you. Sorry, Alex, that I think that it's likely property that she will go for.
Oh, it's all right. My humble little house ain't going to sort of spark any interest.
Well, you say that. Maybe you'll be second or third in line, not first in line. But the reason that often that politicians are attracted to taxing property is it isn't mobile, right? They know who owns it. They know where it is. You can't hide it. You can't move it. So I'm expecting somehow or other, you've floated a couple of the ideas there that maybe it's a capital gain if you sell your primary residence and downsize and you've made a profit on it. Maybe Rachel will help herself to a slice of that profit. That's possible. It could be a more just straight direct property tax, some levy added onto your council tax, say for national purposes. I'm speculating there, but she's likely to go for property. That will gum up what's already a pretty disastrous property market, because if you know you're going to face a very big bill upon selling your house, you're going to be hugely disincentivized to do so. You won't decide to downsize because you'll calculate the huge bill that you face. So I think property she's going to go for. But Alex, if you were minded to start saving for your pension, I'm afraid that's going to get pretty difficult for you as well, I would guess, because I suspect that the present rather sensible, even if complicated, rules we have about pensions are going to tighten up. At the moment, you can tuck money away in your pension up to a very reasonable amount. I think you can put away up to 40,000 or so in a year, and then you pay the tax on it when you draw it out, not when you put it in. So the idea is you kind of smooth your income over your life, and when your earnings are relatively high over your life cycle, you put some money away and you draw that down later in life when your earnings might be lower. I suspect she's going to make it harder for people to save into their pension, and the tax breaks on doing so will become meaner. So it's going to be grim all around. Of course, none of this fits in with what used to be their professed strategy, although we haven't heard the phrase for a while, that they are laser focused on growth. Remember that? Laser focused. Growth is our number one priority. Well, truth of the matter is, if you keep taxing more and regulating more and spending money broadly and efficiently in the public sector, you ain't going to get growth. And the fact that we haven't got growth is making poor Rachel's problems even worse, giving her a migraine every day. Because if we could only get growth into the economy, we could just get back to what we used to have, standard growth rates of 2 or 3% per annum. That's to say, on average, people getting 2 or 3% richer per annum. I'm not saying that would solve all of our problems. It wouldn't make them go away, but wow, it would make them easier to deal with, because tax receipts would start going up because people were doing well and earning more, and you'd have a kind of natural way of eventually getting to balance the books. But unfortunately, she's going to tackle the problem the other way round, make a money grab now, try and say that this is just another one-off where we need some more of your cash to get through a difficult period. I suspect that will dampen growth even further. We may even go into recession. Tax receipts will fall. And you know what? I think in 12 or so months' time, Alex, you and I will be speculating about what will be in the 2026 budget, and it will be equally grim.
Yeah, it's interesting. If we wanted to suddenly, I don't know, turn a corner and start having growth in the economy, we just need to not be left-wing, which is a bit difficult with this current government. I mean, talking about that, before we move on to other things, how doom and gloom is it? Because there was speculation a while ago that France was going to need a bailout from the IMF, that Britain isn't necessarily far behind. Astonishingly, economy, even though we basically have zero growth, we're still actually growing, I don't know, incrementally a 0.0 of a percentage point ahead of our European partners who are really in the doldrums. What are we essentially sitting on? A ticking time bomb? Because it's been suggested to me that either we're going to have to go for the sort of giant charity check from the IMF at some point in this government, or what they could be doing is bailing it out just about enough, but leaving it so that if the government changed and let's say Nigel Farage walked into number 10 Downing Street, that's when the rug could be pulled out from under Britain's feet, and then they'll go, oh look, Nigel Farage crashed the economy.
Yeah, the timing, very, very hard to predict. And I'm usually sceptical about economic forecasts of any type, especially very specific ones, Alex. So I'm not going to tell you that, you know, doomsday is going to arrive at 11 a.m. on the 12th of March, 2027. It's very, very hard to predict. What we can say in broad terms, I think it is undeniable, that our present public sector and the state of our public finances is completely unsustainable. You can get by with continuing to live in la-la land for another week, another month, maybe another few years. But if something's unsustainable, it cannot be sustained forever. And the sheer scale of our national debt, oftentimes this is described as being about 100% of GDP. That's to say, if we wanted to clear our cash debt, we would have to take every single penny generated in the UK for a full year to pay it off. But the picture's much bleaker than that, because we have huge liabilities that we haven't worked out what to do about. We've got an ageing population, so their healthcare needs, social care needs, pension needs are generally going to tick up. We have colossally generous gold-plated public sector pensions. If you worked in the public sector, not the private sector, again, they're unfunded. I mean, these potentially run into trillions. The way of thinking about it, I think a reasonable number to roughly have in your head is that debt in the UK, government debt, is north of £100,000 for every man, woman and child, and it's going up. And that can't keep going up. The problem about the IMF thing, Alex, lots of people think back to or look through the history books about what happened in the 1970s when we called in the IMF. Britain's fiscal problem is now so vast, it is almost impossible to believe that the IMF could bail us out. So we will have to do the surgery ourselves, almost for certain. And the longer you leave surgery, the more painful it is when it comes. But there's no sign that Rachel is going to get on with it anytime soon. So when it does come, perhaps in the form of the next government, it's going to be more painful than it needed to be. But we've left it so long, it's going to be painful even if we started now.
Mark, thank you ever so much. Thank you for the doom and gloom, cheering us all up. And by the way, when I am 70, living under a motorway bridge with cats, will you have a spare room for me? Because I am kind of worried.
They'll probably tax that to death as well, Alex.
What, my motorway bridge, my brazier?
Yeah.
Oh, great. Never mind. Oh, well, if people can just lob me the occasional stale sandwich and some Friskies for my feline friends, that will do me well. All right, Mark Littlewood, thank you ever so much, Director of Popular Conservatism. The number is on your screen if you wanted to give me a call. And if you're listening on the radio, then let me read it for you. 0344 499 1000 is the number to dial if you'd like to interact, because we're going to be doing some calls and some messages after the break. But should we squeeze one in before the break? Let's do a call before the break, shall we? As I can see the Cape Canaveral in front of me lighting up like Christmas decorations. Let's first go to Richard, who's in Birmingham. Hello there, Richard.
Hello, Alex. Brilliant programme as ever.
Oh, thanks.
All I wanted to say is I'm a Birmingham City fan.
No.
And this is nothing to do with security or anything, because Birmingham Villa is probably the most violent local derby in the country apart from Celtic. So the police cope with that, well, whenever we play.
Yeah.
So there's no reason they can't cope with the Israeli fans. So it's got nothing to do with security.
This is all being twisted and turned. Like I said at the start of the programme, look at the provenance of this. This started off with the Muslim vote MPs doing a petition saying they can't come here, telling us, gaslighting us, that a year ago in Amsterdam, when there was a pogrom against the visiting supporters, when there were WhatsApp groups of Arabs and Muslims all in their little chats, you know, people who are taxi drivers and all the rest of it, trying to hunt down these fans to attack them. And we're being told, no, it's those fans, they're football hooligans. We must protect the local population against them. But I've done a bit of digging into this, looking at the demography of Birmingham, which is now a white minority city. I don't know if people realise that.
I've left there for that very reason.
Well, it is now a white minority city. That's not one thing or another. Skin colour is a completely different issue. But one third of the population is Muslim. And again, that doesn't necessarily mean anything of itself. But we know certainly within the Muslim community, which now numbers at least a third of the population, there are Islamists. There are people who explicitly, overtly hate the Jews, and quite frankly, like I said before, they'll start saying the Jews can't come here. There is a no-go zone for Jewish people because we can't keep them safe. That to me sounds like a veiled threat. It starts with them and it moves to everybody else. It will be us next.
There's I think it's us already, because there's no-go areas for me in Birmingham.
Wow.
And it includes where I was born, in Bordesley Green.
What, so you say you're too afraid to go there?
No, the only reason I go there is to go to Heartlands Hospital every now and again, and I just don't feel safe going there.
Why? What goes on? What does it look like?
It's just intimidating. It looks like Afghanistan.
Right.
You got your Palestinian flags there, everything, and it's just so intimidating. And you know, I mean, my child is mixed race. So it's got nothing to do with race.
It's nothing to do with colour of skin.
Her mother feels the same.
It's nothing to do with colour of skin. It's nothing to do with racism. It's not even anything to do with disliking Muslims. It's about Islamists. It's about the radical extremists who shout the loudest, who play very clever games of grievance politics, who dictate the narrative, who frankly our establishment are too weak to confront because by and large they are scared of them. They're scared of these people.
Been like that for years.
Yeah.
And, I mean, I live in Norfolk now, which it's just so different.
Right.
I keep telling them it'll come here one day.
Well, that's the thing. That, you know, when you look at, so when I was looking into the changing demography of Birmingham online, back in the 1950s, it was something like 98% white British, okay? Yeah. And so you're looking in the space of about 70 years, one generation, it has completely changed. Completely changed, where now over half the population aren't white British. Again, nothing about skin colour, but 21 or 25% of the population are foreign born. So, you know, a fifth to a quarter of the population weren't even born in the UK. And if you were to press that going forward and look at things like birth rates, the demographic change now is on steroids. It's going to change radically, and it's going to change within my lifetime. So when I am under the motorway bridge with cats, I'll be looking at a very different Britain to the one I'm living in today. And already I can see how things are changing in the last 5 years. And it's really quite frightening because it feels like we're on a runaway train to something pretty dystopian. Richard, thank you ever so much for your call. Now, if you want to be like Richard and you want to have a chit-chat with me in the studio, please call this number, 0344 499 1000. It's charged at your normal network rate, so essentially don't cost you any extra. It's not some sort of premium line. I ain't one of those babes. You can also use that number to send me a WhatsApp message or indeed leave me a voice note on WhatsApp. 87222 is the number if you'd like to send me a good old-fashioned SMS text message. If you're going to do that, however, you have to write the word talk before you write your message. We're also on X, of course we are, and our handle is @talkTV. Going to be taking your calls and reading some of your messages after this.
This is right outside the school. Two guys smoking sheesh pipes. And there's the playground in the background. So this is what's happening around Cherry Lane Primary School in West Drayton as we're talking. Look at this. Look at this.
I've never seen anything like it. Look at the
this.
state. Look at that.
Look at this. Come through this underground tunnel walkway, a pedestrian pathway that goes underneath the M4.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Welcome back. Right, it's that part of the show where I want to hear from you. Let's do some of your messages first. Gary has said Tottenham Hotspur have a large Jewish fan base. Are they now going to be banned from Villa Park? This is the thing. It isn't just about saying that visiting Israeli fans could be targeted or there could be violence. Of course, now it's all their fault. They're the rampagers, the marauders, the hooligans. But what about people here? What about the British Jews? Mika said first Jews look too Jewish to protest, then Jewish people are forced off our streets and out of universities. Then it escalates to murder and segregation from public events. What next? Kristallnacht? But you're right. We did experience during the pro-Palestine marches police saying to visibly Jewish people, well, you shouldn't come around, it might not be safe for you. Then people felt too afraid to go out and walk around places, parts of London, looking visibly Jewish. Of course, the mad pro-Palestine mob in our universities, on our campuses. Then the murder in the synagogue. And now saying, oh, well, you can't come along to a football match. It is a very slippery slope, and we're sliding down it faster than a toboggan. Very good point made by Mick there. Barry says, I think the football authorities and UEFA should ban Aston Villa from the competition. They have no legitimate reason to refuse Maccabi Tel Aviv supporters any more than refusing Celtic or Rangers supporters. That's actually a very good point. They should actually turn around and say to Aston Villa, you know, you want to ban a load of visiting fans, then you don't get to play yourself. Oh, it is so frightening. So frightening. The West Midlands Police cannot guarantee the safety of Jewish football fans. Cannot or will not or do not want to or are too frightened to. Did the independent MPs elected on the Muslim vote take the normal oath in which they swear allegiance to the monarch, King Charles III, his heirs and successors, along with a pledge to uphold the UK's rights and freedoms and laws? Well, they might have done that, but they probably didn't mean it. It's called takia, where they pretend. Oh, and do you know what? If these are the people, you look at some of them, they all wear their suits, they're university educated, they look like upstanding members of society. If these are the toxic ideologies within those parts of the community, what about all the others? Really frightening, isn't it? Let's have a chit-chat now. First of all, let's speak to Matthew, who's in Cheshire. Good morning to you, Matthew.
Good morning, Alex. Lovely to talk to you. I went to bed last night. I went to bed last night. Got up this morning and it's like 1930s Germany. What's going on?
Well, no, this is it. What is going on? Because we warned this. We warned, a lot of people were shouting from the rooftops 2 years ago after October the 7th, when all of a sudden there seemed to be these pro-Palestine protests, literally, after the blood was demonically shed in the kibbutz of Israel. They were already lining up to play out their grievance narratives. And we said back then, there's anti-Semitism. We said it under Corbyn's Labour Party. Things are ugly in the left wing of this country.
That's it exactly, because it was a couple of years ago when Corbyn was in power, a leader, which was unbelievable as it is, they were going on about his anti-Semite, and I was thinking, oh, it's only a little thing. And now, within 14, 15 months of a Labour government, it's rife. I don't know many Jewish people. I've only met a few people, but the people I've met are Jewish. They were completely lovely, delightful, friendly, welcoming people. I don't fully understand what it's
The problem is this. The problem is this, because at the root cause of all of this, actually, and this is the elephant in the room, this is why it is spiralling out of control, because this government don't want to call it what it is, which is the spread of militant Islamism. That is what is going on here. And because they've not clamped down and managed that toxic alien ideology coming from the Middle East, which has nothing to do with this nation and its Western values, they've been so afraid to call that out, so afraid in stopping these pro-Palestine marches, so afraid of cracking down on the sort of toxic things being said on university campuses, that this cancer is now infecting the minds of young British-born individuals, people who should know better. The very same people, can I just say, if you want to look at Nazi Germany and you think, how on earth did all these people go along with Hitler's vile politics? It's the same people. It's the academics. It's the lawyers. It's the teachers. It's the left-wing unions. It is why the Nazi Party was nationalist socialist, because you find this sick symbiosis, particularly within the far left of politics, and Islamism. And there's plenty of people who are left-wing, but not mad Marxists. There are plenty of people who go to mosque and mean nobody harm and actually contribute to society. But unfortunately, the two radical elements of both of them is a bit like Fred West meeting Rose West. They get together and they wreak destruction.
When does it stop? Who's next?
Well, this is it.
Next? If you're gay or you're disabled or you're trans or whatever, you're a Christian, you're a Catholic, where does it stop?
Where does it stop?
With the United Kingdom, with Great Britain, our country's made on diversity. We are mixed people. So why all of a sudden are we being people are being so hatred and allowed to be like that? And enough's enough. This government needs to stand up and put a stop to it now, because there's going to be rioting on the streets with these people. That's what they're scared of.
Oh, it's going to happen anyway. It's happening, Matthew. That is already in train. Do not think otherwise. They've already discovered the caches of weapons that are being smuggled over on those small boats, as well as all the people that are being flooded into this country by the likes of the Taliban, who are also, of course, writing letters for people, would-be terrorists, going like, we're scared of the Taliban. The Taliban has said, dear person, we're going to come and kill you. Love the Taliban. And they come over to Britain, present that letter, and we go, oh, do you want a 4-star hotel? Do you want to go in this nice little new-built house just for you? Because you're going to land on these shores and instantly become a nuclear scientist, a doctor and a lawyer. But we're being deliberately invaded, right? Hostile entities know what they're doing. And because we've got this mad doctrine of tolerance, we've started to tolerate intolerance. And so this cancer is being allowed to just grow freely. And everyone's too afraid to call it out. That's where we need to begin, unless we actually have a Prime Minister who will stand up and say about the disgusting social media posts of some of those MPs, this is not welcome in society, you're a monster, your ideology has no place in Britain. Then we're in a big, big mess. Because if he feels he can say the worst possible things about Reform UK, things that are completely baseless, that actually aren't even attached remotely to the truth, when he starts using words like far-right and fascist against simply the political opposition, if he suddenly feels emboldened to say stuff like that, why can't he call out medieval extremist barbarism for what it is? This is what's so blimmin' alarming about this lot. Matthew, thank you ever so much for your call. Right, we're going to take a short break now and keep your thoughts coming in, because I'll take some more calls as well throughout the programme. 0344 499 1000 is the number to call to register your interest if you don't get on air straight away. First time round, we call you back because we love to have you on board HMS Common Sense. After the break, we're going back into Who Done It, the Chinese spy case with Cindy Yu. She's a brilliant columnist at the time. She's author of the Chinese Whispers Substack. She's up after this.
across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Hello, welcome back. And who done it? Who crashed the case against the two Chinese spies? Was it the CPS? Was it the Deputy National Security Advisor? Is it the Labour government? Well, everyone seems to be blaming everybody else. But one thing is clear. Somebody wanted to appease Beijing. Let's speak now to Cindy Yu, columnist at The Times, author of the brilliant Chinese Whispers Substack. Cindy, it seems to me from the very beginning of his premiership, Sir Keir Starmer has wanted to have a very different relationship with China than perhaps his predecessors, although not that dramatically different if we're going to be pragmatic about this. But what is going on with this? We've got the MI5 chief saying that even just last week they managed to thwart a Chinese plan, an attack on national security. Very frustrated and deeply concerned, it seems, about the fact that something funny's going on here. Where does the buck stop?
Well, ultimately it stops with Keir Starmer because he is the Prime Minister. Now, Alex, if you bear with me, because I think there's a lot of blame to be had, to be honest. I don't think anyone has covered themselves in glory in this entire fiasco, with the exception of perhaps Matthew Collins, whose witness statements, he's the Deputy National Security Advisor, whose witness statements have been dredged through the media this week. Now, before those witness statements came out, we thought that maybe the government wouldn't call China a threat. And that's why the case collapsed, because the law at the time needed the government to at least be able to make that case. But then when the witness statements came out, it was, pages and pages of threat, in terms of all sorts of espionage, literal examples. And so then the question becomes, why did the CPS not think that was enough to pursue that line of argument? And now the MPs are basically hauling Stephen Parkinson in front of them, asking him a series of very particular, specific questions to get him to explain. But the reason I say that buck stops with Keir Starmer ultimately is because we also have known, the Number 10 has admitted, that they knew the case was going to collapse 2 days before the trial did collapse. So at that point, if you're Keir Starmer, you think the evidence, if you do think that the evidence deserves to go into trial, then you should be thinking outside the box and thinking, well, how can we make sure that it does go to trial? Because it'd be a scandal if it doesn't. And perhaps the government thought the evidence wasn't strong enough anyway. If that is the case, they should say that. Right, but that's not what they've said. What they've said is that they are disappointed that the trial is not going ahead. So if they're disappointed, then they should have made sure that the trial to go ahead. I mean, it's just utterly bizarre. And the most charitable way to understand it is that Keir Starmer, as a former lawyer, as a former director of public prosecution himself, was doing things by the book, that politicians shouldn't intervene. That's the most charitable understanding. And if that is the case, that's pretty negligent. And I think, not thinking outside the box enough. But obviously, there are even less charitable ways to understand why he would have wanted this case to collapse.
Well, let's look at some of those less charitable ways, because if this government really did believe that China was a threat, it begs the question why they're not moving to block the mega embassy. In fact, it's suggested now that they've already cut some sort of deal with China about them being able to build what could potentially be used as a massive labyrinthine subterranean spying hub, which would be incredibly against the law. Why have there been so many ministerial trips to Beijing already in just 1 year of a Labour government? Why are they not listening to advice from the security services when it comes to writing the giant charity cheque to China to get all of the widgets for net zero? Because they might actually turn around and start using mealy-mouthed words when it comes to the security threat posed by China. Oh, well, we do know that they do some spying and this, that and the other. But we don't need words, we need deeds. We actually need to see actions that are provable, that we are resilient against the threats posed by Beijing. We take it seriously and we're taking the right measures to protect our national security and integrity. And yet this government don't appear to be doing that.
Yes, well, you raise a lot of issues there, Alex. I mean, I think just to take a few of those, absolutely, you're right in the sense that this Labour government wants to be warmer with China. If you look at the economic situation that they have, this week news that the British economy has been growing, but 0.1%. Barely growing at all. This is the economic situation that they are trying to turn around. And that leaves them with very little, arguably very little option.
Very few left-wing options, some might say.
Sorry?
Very few left-wing options. There's plenty of right-wing options they could probably use to turn the economy around, but
Yes,
they don't want to take those.
absolutely. Yes, exactly. So I mean, part of the package of boosting growth is not to basically screw China around as well. But if the economy was doing better, I think they would have more leverage. And then the net zero thing, I think is so interesting because what we've done in this country, and Boris Johnson recently admitted that he regrets the net zero 2050 target, because what has happened is that this target was set without really a roadmap of how to get there with British goods or with goods from British allies, and pushing the UK into using Chinese supply chains without actually having our own manufacturing supported at all. You know, the UK used to be very, very good at wind. And actually now Denmark is better at doing wind than the UK is because there's been no industrial strategy linked to it. And on this, I actually think the Chinese playbook it's actually quite instructive about how we can do it because, you know, they burn so much coal still and they're building so much renewables. And why are they doing that? It's not contradictory. It's because they want energy security above all. They don't want to tackle climate change above all. And so why can't the UK and other Western countries have that kind of dose of self-interest?
Right.
And be a bit more
exactly. This is what's so crazy because it's not like carbon emissions, no national boundaries, and so the CO2 in the atmosphere just sort of hovers over China alone and never spreads and affects the world as a whole. We've essentially exported our carbon footprint while self-flagellating at the altar of net zero, writing a massive cheque and giving China a huge industrial boost while we deindustrialise. I mean, this is... China has actually now threatened Starmer with consequences if there is a delay over the new super embassy in London. Lin Jian, who's a foreign ministry spokesman, said China had grave concerns and strong dissatisfaction. And he's called on the government to immediately fulfil its obligations and honour its commitments. Otherwise, the British side bear all the consequences. What commitments, Cindy, do you think are these? What has been promised by the Labour government to China that we don't know about?
Well, we don't know about them, but what we do know is that the application for the embassy was resubmitted when Labour came back in. So I think from whatever Chinese side perceived, and it is pretty clear for all to see that this government wants the warmer relationships with China, Beijing thought, let's give it another go, because under the Tories, it wasn't going anywhere. Let's give it another go under this new Labour government. I don't know what background commitments, if any, were given. I mean, the Chinese, as usual, do not make it easier for themselves by coming out so belligerently in these statements, such wolf warrior rhetoric. And you know, people don't take that kindly. You know, I mean, the UK doesn't respond well to that. But when we talk about these kind of consequences, tit for tat, it is worth noting that the British Embassy in Beijing is currently in need of a really, really big refurbishment and has been for years. And the Chinese are literally playing, I mean, I guess you can call it hostage diplomacy with the building site, because they're not giving the permit for the British to have a refurbished embassy. And there were rumours earlier that actually water had also, you know, there was no running water in the embassy, all this sort of stuff. So basically, you know, there are ways in which that the Chinese could say, well, if you're not going to give us our embassy, we're not going to give you your embassy, and other repercussions like that. And so the embassy issue has become this horrible political conundrum for Starmer. You know, let's be really, really clear about that, because this is an issue that Xi Jinping has himself raised with Starmer. And so if it doesn't go ahead, China will be incandescent. But if it does go ahead, I'm not sure that the government here politically can square that either with how much how big the row has become now. So it's a real conundrum, and I'm not sure how they're going to get out of this one. One thing that I think that one concern that people do have is about, you know, the wider capability of espionage that comes from this super embassy, right? And that's on these alleged cables, which we haven't had confirmation of their existence yet. So it would be really, really good if the intelligence services would give us their assessment on the record of what they think those are. I mean, I don't know, maybe that's not possible because it's classified, but it seems pretty important to this decision if they think that the risk can be managed or not at all. If they don't think the risk can be managed, we shouldn't be having this conversation at all. You know?
Perhaps actually our intelligence services are playing a very shrewd game and making sure that the Chinese aren't aware that we can actually thwart whatever dastardly espionage plans that they have. At least it'd be nice to hope so. Cindy, thank you ever so much for coming on the show. Cindy Yu, columnist at The Times, author of a brilliant Substack, Chinese Whispers. OK, let's squeeze in a quick call before the break, because we've got Steve in Birmingham talking again about the, well, Israeli fan ban. Hello there, Steve.
Hello. I'd just like to say, Alex, right, they've banned the supporters from coming to the football game, right? In this country, if you go up to Scotland, Celtic Park, they're waving the Palestine flag, right? So what should happen? All the football clubs and the supporters should raise the flag for Israel at Saturday's game.
Oh, they're not going to do that anytime soon, are they, though? But like I said...
But football supporters, fans can take their flags in and they can raise them for them. Because the police have banned them. The war's over. There should be peace now.
Oh no, the war's not over. I'm afraid for these people who go on the pro-Palestine marches, they don't want the war to be over. They love it. Like I said, it's the grievance narrative that pushes forward the Islamist ideology. The worst possible scenario is that this war is over and they can't go out on their marches drumming up a load of anxiety and hatred towards Israel. That's exactly what they want to do.
But the one to go and look at YouTube and see what's happening in Palestine today with the terrorist group. People need to go and look at it, and then they'll realise.
You'd think people would realise, but unfortunately, all of that information is freely available for people to look at, and they're so brainwashed that you could put facts in front of them and they still wouldn't believe. Steve, thank you ever so much for your call. We're going to stick with this subject because after the break, we're going to have on Andrew Fox, a great friend of this programme, but with a different hat on this time. Rather than being the military and defence analyst from the Henry Jackson Society, he also happens to be the honorary president of Aston Villa's Jewish Supporters Club. So under that particular guise, he's going to regale us with his analysis and his opinions on the fan ban. That's after this.
I'm not defending football hooliganism and disruption, tips into violence. That's a really bad thing, and that's happened, sadly, for decades, for hundreds of years around competitive sport in our country. But this is a much darker situation. What's really happened here is that West Midlands Police have listened to parts of the community in places like Aston and Handsworth and have come to the view that they cannot protect Jewish people on the streets of those neighbourhoods.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Hello and welcome back, and welcome to the show. Andrew Fox, honorary president of Aston Villa's Jewish Villains Supporters Club. Great to have you on the programme, Andrew. Now, when we look at what's been announced here, to me, it looks very much like an increasingly assertive, if not aggressive, cohort of Islamists in Birmingham, including people who are elected representatives in the House of Commons, have made a big noise about the Jewish supporters coming from Tel Aviv, and they've got their own way. In fact, I want to play you a clip of an imam in Birmingham first. This is what he said.
We safeguard the vulnerable from any type of exploitation. That is the character of a Muslim, who has a Muslim as a rahmah. Remember, rahmah is in its place. It's in its place. When the Tel Aviv fans come to Birmingham in a few weeks, we will not show them rahmah in Birmingham.
So it seems to me this guy and some of the Muslim vote MPs have all turned around, had a petition saying we don't want the Tel Aviv fans to come, and the police have just buckled to it. Is the tail wagging the dog at this point, Andrew?
Yeah, it looks like it, doesn't it? And, you know, there's also suggestions from the police that there is a wider security threat against the Tel Aviv fans, which I suspect looks very much like the organised pogrom that we saw in Amsterdam just last year, where a coordinated WhatsApp group of 900 people organised attacks on Jews by busing people in from across the Netherlands to attack them and go on what they described as a Jew hunt. So if that is indeed the threat, then unfortunately the police have buckled to it rather than stand up and face those thugs down if they do show their faces on match day in Birmingham.
What surprises me, what shocks me, what appalls me is when you think of people like Lucy Connolly, sentenced to 31 months in prison for what she put on Twitter. You have people like that imam who, to me, seems to be openly inciting violence against Jews. We've recently had the attack on the synagogue. We've got people elected to the parliament. Zara Sultanas now saying actually all Israeli athletes and sports people should be banned from competitions because it's normalising genocide. Again, it's the grievance narrative which is often used by people with certain ideologies. And rather than anybody in government calling it out and going, this is a barbaric medieval ideology that has no place in British society, they're all running scared of it. Why?
Yeah, and you know, this is part of their wider campaign. This is all part of the campaign we've seen running for 2 years after the 7th of October slaughter in Israel, where the sort of pro-Palestine movement are trying to create an international pariah status for Israel based on their lies around the genocide hoax in Gaza. So, you know, this is once again politics creeping into our national life from overseas. It's not British, it's not how we do things. And look, when I'm talking to you about Aston Villa, I want to be talking about Emi Buendia from Argentina, or how I would reply to my old man if he asked me to be a Birmingham City fan. That's what I want to talk about. But unfortunately, this foreign nonsense has been dragged onto British streets, which is a real shame.
But it's not just being dragged on, it's not so much creeping in. We're now in a situation where we have seen the attack against a synagogue. We have now seen Jews banned from participating in public life, coming to a football match, because if they dare set foot inside Birmingham at the weekend, they could be physically attacked. I mean, when people look at how Germany descended into utter violence, madness and evil under Adolf Hitler, you should take a little pause and see what's going on in Britain, because this isn't just a small slight creep of a few odd extremists when you're actually having a whole visiting football team worrying about their security and people from a particular country being told, you can't come, you might get killed.
The MP for Perry Barr is Abe Khan, who's one of the Gaza MPs, who's elected not on how he's going to make the life of people in Aston better, not on what we can do about public services in the UK, but on a foreign policy issue. So that, you know, the fact there are 5 MPs in the House of Commons elected on that basis is firstly deeply disturbing. And now they are dragging that toxic politics into into our mainstream. And look, in the last week, we've seen that young man workshopping his chant about putting Zios in the ground. The tweets from some of those Gaza MPs referred explicitly to Zionists and how they should be purged from British society. And this narrative is becoming mainstream. Yeah. Unfortunately, it seems that rather than face it down and provide law and order and safety to football fans, West Midlands police have just tried to duck the issue rather than put cops on the streets in the numbers required. And that again is terrifying because it means the mob has won.
But what I'm seeing as well, looking at X today, is they've not just won, they're being emboldened. What started off as people going, well, for the security of the visiting fans, we probably shouldn't have them here, has become for the security of the people of Birmingham. To these are racists and Zionists, to these are terrorists, to actually Jews can't take part in football matches at all, to all Jewish athletes should be banned. I mean, it literally, when I'm looking at how quickly this is escalating from certain Muslim voices online, they seem to think that they're winning the day and they can actually push this even further. And you know what, Andrew? I'm afraid that they're probably right, because nobody in any position of authority seems to have the guts or the spine to turn round, point at extremist Islamism and say this is what's not welcome, actually send the cops over to their house rather than, I don't know, appearing on someone's Ring doorbell because some tweet they sent 5 years ago and you won't even tell them what the tweet's about. What about that imam? What about actually dragging some of these MPs by their collars into the Parliamentary Standards Office and saying, actually, you can't behave like this? Because it seems to me when we talk about two-tierism, the most disgusting, brutal, vile, misogynistic, anti-Semitic, anti-Western, corrosive ideology we have in this country is exactly the one that nobody in a position of power or in the establishment ever wants to call out.
Well, go look at my Twitter replies, my X replies. If you want to really get a taste for this, I had someone telling me they would stab me if I went to the game against Maccabi Tel Aviv as an Aston Villa fan. And look, and here's the bottom line. If the police can't keep the streets safe for Maccabi fans, how can they keep the streets safe for me or my Jewish friends who go and have a Star of David around their neck? Are they going to be safe at the game? This is a test. This is a test for our society, a test for our government, and we need to make sure we don't fail it. Fortunately, Mr. Starmer, Kemi Badnoch, they've all sort of had a real unity of messaging on this, that it is the wrong decision and needs to be overturned. And I just hope the government have the chutzpah to follow through and actually get it done.
I'm afraid it seems to me that we're very much failing that test. Andrew, fantastic to have you on the programme in a different guise this time. Before we go to break, I just want to read your tweet by Emily Damari. That was the British-Israeli hostage kidnapped by Hamas. She's put online, I was released from Hamas captivity in January. I'm a die-hard Maccabi Tel Aviv fan. I'm shocked to my core with this outrageous decision to ban me, my family and my friends from attending an Aston Villa game in the UK. Football is a way of bringing people together, irrespective of faith, colour or religion. And this disgusting decision is the exact opposite. Shame on you. I do wonder what exactly has become of British society. This is like putting a big sign on the outside of a stadium saying no Jews allowed. Chilling things. I'm back just after this.
across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Hello there, welcome back to the show. Well, everything in Britain today seems to be dominated by things taking place abroad. In fact, geopolitics is very much the rich theme that is running through our politics at the moment, whether we're talking about what has just gone on with the banning of the Maccabi Tel Aviv football fans at Aston Villa, connected directly, of course, to events in the Middle East, whether we're talking about the collapsing of the espionage case against the two people who were allegedly spying for China and the Labour government's ties, perhaps, or passivity to the Chinese Communist Party. And then, of course, we've also got renewed calls for Donald Trump to give Tomahawk missiles to Ukraine, and Nigel Farage coming out quite stridently when it comes to what his approach to Russia and the war in Ukraine would be. So everything seems to be all about the anti-Western axis and how we as a nation and how we as the West are going to deal with these mounting problems. Well, let's speak to a former Defence Secretary now in the form of Grant Shapps. Grant, it's very brilliant, very privileged of me to have you on the programme to cast your expert eye over today's stories. Let's start off with the spying case. Who done it is the big question, isn't it? Is it the fault of the CPS? Is it the fault of the Deputy National Security Advisor? Are these people pulling strings in the Labour Party, in the Labour government, to make sure that whatever advice is provided by the Deputy National Security Advisor, it is tempered with enough warm words about Beijing that they don't upset their mates over in China? I mean, where does the buck stop with all of this?
Yeah, clearly there was political influence over it. That's obvious, because if you look at what the deputy wrote, it actually included language from the Labour Party. So, yes, it definitely had that hue. They're elected, fair enough. I think the problem here is the government have been completely naive about China, and they've also failed just to be upfront about what they're doing. So if their policy is, look, guys, we're just not going to offend China, and therefore no, we're not going to prosecute these people, say it. Don't hide behind the CPS blaming others and the rest of it. It's pretty obvious to me that is their policy. They don't want to upset China. The whole system has a tendency not to want to upset China. I had a situation when I was Defence Secretary where there was a leak of information to do with the payroll for people who worked for our defence establishment. I knew that was a Chinese leak. I was briefed that it was most likely a Chinese leak, but the Foreign Office and others were very keen that I didn't really pin the blame directly on the Chinese. That's the Foreign Office, that's the establishment sort of saying, let's not go too gung-ho on this. And I suspect that's what's happened here. I think the government's been naive in the way they've behaved, and they need to come completely clean with it. And when they do, it will transpire that it was political influence.
Actually, you echo the words spoken robustly by your colleague, Tom Tugendhat, in the House of Commons. Let's have a little watch of what he had to say.
My home has been broken into, my files have been ransacked, somebody has been put in my office by a hostile state, and two parties are playing politics with it. This is national security of the United Kingdom, and yet here we have two individuals seeking to extract information from us. And the government's response is not, as mine was, do everything you can to make sure the prosecution works, but no, process. Well, who the hell's side are you on? This isn't about the bureaucracy, this is about leadership. We're not sent here to be civil servants, we're sent here to lead the country and to make decisions.
And lead the country is what it seems to me these governments aren't doing. But Grant, you sort of suggest that they've been naive over China. Without doubt, I think that they've realised we're too intertwined and too entrenched. Frankly, we have been for an awfully long time now. We've allowed Beijing to interpenetrate a lot of our national infrastructure to a level in which we now, I think, live in fear of what the repercussions could be of a hostile China or an explicitly hostile China. And yet, The Labour government, within 1 year of power, some of the, early months of the Labour government were sending some very important ministers over to Beijing. Rachel Reeves went over there. Jonathan Reynolds went over there. Starmer himself planning to visit next year. How naive are they? Or are they actually in hock with China? Do they actually rather like some of the ideas that China has for the world?
Well, here's the thing. I believe that China is a reality, and they are a big economy and coming superpower, and they exist, and we can't just wish them away. So I have no objection if the government's policy is we're going to deal with China, we're going to send ministers there, or the prime minister. That's fine. That's a decision that has to be made. We're economically interlinked, and the rest of it. What I really object to is them not being upfront about the way that they deal with these threats on spying and elsewhere. When I was business secretary, I threw China out retrospectively of their ownership of something called Newport Wafer Fab. So this was a chip factory. And it was a controversial decision. It was a decision that I knew would have diplomatic consequences. But I find with the Chinese, the best approach is to be completely candid and upfront with them. Right. If you're going to have a relationship with a country that is prepared to spy on you, a country that has a very different form of government and chooses to sustain its own non-democratic way of life and would like to impose that on others, then fine, be honest about it, and they will respect you for it. So actually, when I was very clear about getting them out of Newport Wafer Fab, they understood the decision, they understood where we're coming from. The same would be the case if that prosecution had continued against these two alleged spies. They are able to separate that from the wider relationship. The naivety is of this government thinking that they have to somehow sort of go soft, go light on China and instruct the intelligence forces and others, CPS or whatever.
This is the problem, actually. Britain seems to have forgotten how to stand up to anyone or anything, particularly existential threats. So scared are we, it seems, of the potential repercussions. But talking about standing up to adversaries, Zelensky is off to Washington to meet President Trump. One hopes that President Trump might bolden his rhetoric when it comes to Vladimir Putin. One thing we have learned is they've had a phone conversation where apparently President Trump has said to Putin, right, you better get round the negotiating table again, or I'm going to send 1,000 Tomahawk missiles over to Ukraine. And apparently that suddenly made Vladimir Putin interesting in listening. Talking about the approach in the United Kingdom, Nigel Farage, who could well end up as our next Prime Minister if there was an election tomorrow, certainly looking at the polling. When he was asked, doing an interview with Michelle Hussein for her new Bloomberg programme, his approach to Russian aggression, specifically on the encroachment of Russian jets into NATO airspace, he said, yes, we should shoot them down. If you were back in your post as Defence Secretary, if you were even the Prime Minister, would you have the same approach? Would you say, right, if Russia encroaches into NATO airspace, those planes are coming out the sky?
Yes, to put it bluntly, the problem that we have is that the West, for whatever reason, our government and Trump certainly seem to think that Putin is more powerful than he really is. Putin, I would observe, at every single stage during this Ukraine war, has set red lines, and when we've said, no, that's not acceptable, he has backed down. That's training Ukrainian troops, sending our tanks to Ukraine, authorizing the use, as I did, of our Storm Shadow weapons in Crimea, and many, many other examples. The reality of this is that he is somebody who only understands force. He is actually he understands the power of NATO. NATO many times outmatches the old Soviet Red Army. What is the remnants of that in Russia now? And all we need to do is be clear that if you interfere, then there will be consequences. And all this stuff of, oh, we can't do that, it might poke the bear and the rest of it. Putin is fundamentally weak. His economy is weak. And the best thing that we could do is actually show that there's a red line that he cannot cross. So, yes, I think he should do that. I think that on the wider thing with Trump, look, I hope that this time he's serious about it, but he's given Putin 2 weeks before. He's given him the red carpet treatment. He's tried all these different things. He should just provide those Tomahawk long-range missiles and be very clear to my previous point. That's the only way you can deal with Putin.
Well, it seems to me that perhaps Putin is now being called to heel by President Trump on the threat that they might send the long-range missiles, which of course would have access to places like St. Petersburg and Moscow, but most importantly gives the Ukrainian forces the ability to target military compounds and electricity plants in Russia. The problem perhaps with Putin, though, is he's essentially built Russia over the past 3 years on this very fragile thin ice of a military-industrial complex. His economy now essentially rests upon arms manufacturing, and he'll have a big problem when 1 million odd Russian troops come back to Russia, suddenly have nothing to do, and the economy collapses. How on earth, therefore, do we build some sort of, I hate to use the phrase, but a golden bridge? Because actually Putin now has gone so deep into this war of attrition that I don't think he's got a way out without inflicting severe damage on his own reputation and his own economy. Not that I'm sympathetic.
Yeah, I mean, it's taken his economy right to the edge, and I'm sorry for the Russian people, not least that 1 million Russians have been killed or seriously injured in this completely pointless, unjustified, illegal invasion of a democratic neighbor. And his economy has been driven, as you say, by being a war economy, but we see now a sky-high inflation, that they're, essentially running out of money. If this war, I think he needs to settle it, because if it carried on for another year or 18 months, it would bankrupt Russia. You can't forever sustain these wars. In the end, if you look at the history of warfare, wars are actually classically an economic issue in many ways, because the losing side loses when they run out of resources to carry on fighting war, typically. And that is what will happen here, which is why actually I don't think that he should be allowed to take democratic land that he's invaded and keep it as his own. I think we should have enough confidence that our way of life, our system, our democratic values, our ability to have debates and arguments and not be locked up and actually murdered, which is what Putin has done to his lead opposition, that is something worth us all fighting for. And that fighting sometimes costs us money. Luckily for us, it doesn't cost us lives, unlike our Ukrainian friends. But that is worth battling for. And you're right, the Russian economy will collapse under its own weight of this war machine if we just don't let him off the hook at this point.
You talk about the West fighting for its freedoms and for its values, so I really do want to get your perspective on what is going on at Aston Villa, or particularly the West Midlands Police, who have deemed that it would be too unsafe to allow the Maccabi Tel Aviv fans to come to Birmingham for a football match. It seems to me the provenance of all of this has been petitions by Gaza MPs, which have been heightened and exacerbated by imams in Birmingham. It seems to me the message is now clear that a few people with barbaric medieval anti-Semitic attitudes are calling the shots of who gets to go to Birmingham and who does not. Apparently, discussions are now happening at pace across government to resolve the ban on Israeli fans attending a football game in Birmingham. That's according to Downing Street. But it seems to me at the very crux of this problem is a political establishment that are too scared to call out the genesis of all of this, which is Islamism. They're not pointing at the elephant in the room.
Absolutely. What kind of message does this send out that you may not go to Birmingham as a Jew if you happen to support this football team? And what will it feel like for other Jews who want to go to that match, perhaps wearing a Star of David or something else? I mean, really, is this what it's come to, that we can't manage to police a football match in order to allow both sides to attend? It is the wrong decision. It must be overturned. Otherwise, the message about what this country is, where it's headed, is in completely the wrong direction. And as you point out in your question, this would be a triumph for certain people who have lobbied the police into this course of action in a manner that sends all of
Well, let's talk about who the certain people are, because this is my concern. Everyone just says certain people. Nobody actually wants to call it by its name. And just speaking to Andrew Fox earlier, who happens to be the honorary president of the Aston Villa Jewish Supporters Club, but also an expert in Middle Eastern policies, he's pointed out that what happened a year ago in Amsterdam when the Tel Aviv fans went for a football match there, something that we're being told by certain people was their football hooliganism, was quite the opposite. It was a pogrom. There were people being bussed in from around the continent to go and hunt the Jews, to go and find these people in coordinated social media messaging groups saying, I've seen one over here, I've seen one over there, I'm a taxi driver, I'm going to pick one up, I'm going to beat one up. That is what's going on. And perhaps the reason why the West Midlands police have decided this is too big to police is because you say that we might be heading for something quite dark. Perhaps we're there already.
Look, I say this, albeit as a former Home, albeit briefly as a former Home Secretary. We must not have a position in this country where what we can and cannot do, our basic fundamental freedoms, are dictated to us by others. And this is the same point about Putin and him wanting to change our way of life. It's the same point here. It is unacceptable for the police to simply say, we throw our hands up in despair, we fail. We fail before we've even dropped. We can't police this. We have to be better than that, and we can certainly do better than that than has happened, as you pointed out, on continental Europe. So this is, I mean, it's a completely unacceptable decision. It's rare I agree with the first utterance out of the Prime Minister Keir Starmer's mouth, but in this case, he's absolutely right that the decision is unacceptable. I hope and trust it will be overturned, but I do think you're right to link it to some of the other weaknesses that we see. If you give an inch, if you start to give in to people who are essentially applying racism, anti-Semitism in this case, to a situation, there is simply no end to it. This decision essentially rewards Hamas and what some of those imams have been saying for their activity. And any right-thinking person knows that is not the Britain that we want to be living in.
What should happen, before I let you go, Grant, what should happen to some of these pro-Gaza MPs in Parliament? Because when you look at the things that they have said on social media, it's absolutely horrifying. They have been essentially calling the visiting fans terrorists, Zionists. You had Zara Sultana now using the opportunity to turn around and call for all Israeli athletes to be banned from participation in any sort of sport abroad. It seems to me that they're the people who need to face some kind of punishment because they seem to be getting away with it. They're emboldened. They're becoming more assertive. As far as I can tell, they're becoming more aggressive. And it doesn't seem to me, I mean, look, I'm going to read you this tweet by Iqbal Mohammed, who is one of these pro-Gaza MPs, saying, thank you all who put the safety of Aston Villa fans and Birmingham residents and the British public above the Zionist and political pressure to let Israeli hooligans and terrorists run riot in our country. They're all being rather emboldened now, aren't they? And I don't think that anything's being done about this. Should they face something? Should they be having some sort of appearance in front of Parliamentary Standards Committee? Is there something that we can do as a society to tell them that their sectarian politics are not welcome here?
Yeah, I mean, it is just racism. We should just call it what it is. It is writing that kind of thing goes way beyond the kind of appropriate. I mean, for a member of Parliament as well to be saying these things goes way beyond the appropriate, and we should call it out. But I have to say this to you: when you have a government that, in response to a terrorist attack on October the 7th, and I know there's been a lot of water under the bridge since, but essentially rewards the terrorist organization by choosing that moment in time to recognize a state of Palestine before any of the building blocks for that state have been put in place, before there's any international agreements in place, only encourages this kind of behavior. And I think that it is a tragic mistake that Hamas themselves are saying, we have achieved something here. We have achieved Palestinian state recognition. Well, if a terrorist organization is telling you that the policy of the British government has helped them, don't you think that should give us all pause for thought? And so I'm afraid it is this government all too often playing into the hands of these extremist MPs who are off to their left as they essentially recite some really disgusting theories online in their tweets and elsewhere. I'll leave it to the authorities to work out what to do with them. But I have to say the atmosphere is created by a government that thinks it's a good idea to reward a terrorist organisation for a heinous attack on October 7th.
Grant Shapps, thank you ever so much for joining me today. All right, we're going to be taking a short break. Let me just give you an update of what is coming out of 10 Downing Street about this particular story. Keir Starmer said he will do everything in his power to ensure Jewish people are safe amid the ban on Israeli fans attending a football game. A Number 10 spokesman said the Prime Minister will do everything in his power to give Jewish communities the security they deserve. And as he has made clear, we think this is the wrong decision. Like everyone seeing this news, the PM has been angered by the decision. I'm still waiting for someone to come and use the I word, Islamism. Well, why can't anyone do that? I can say it. That's what it is. That's what's going on here. That was the beginning of all of this. Come on, grow up. Use your big boy words. Right, we're going to be taking a short break now, but I want you to use your big boy words by calling this number, 03444991000, if you'd like to have a chit-chat with me. Give me your thoughts and opinions on the news stories of today. Are we being too weak on China? Are we being too weak when it comes to the radicals who think they can dictate what goes on in our society and make people feel unsafe? 87222 is the number if you'd like to send me a text message. Both of those are your normal network rates. You can also send me a WhatsApp or leave me a voice note, 03444991000. If you're going to send a text, however, to 8722, write talk before your message. And back after this.
I mean, why did they politically assassinate me in the most unchristian and clumsy and unfair way? I don't even have to ask them that. You know, that's going to be played out in court. That's not going to drop. But look, at the end of the day, that's history. They decided to do that. It was a surprise to me. I don't understand it. And as I said, I played a big part in achieving what we collectively achieved. And many of us carried it on while Nigel left the field to make money.
across the UK. On DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Hello, welcome back to the show. I've got some exciting news for you. Oh, yes, I do. You know, Mr. Jenrick over there, once upon a time, he was sort of a nice, softy, centrist dad kind of Tory. Then he shaved his head and took his Ozempic, and he became a hardliner, and we love him for it. Anyway, he's going to start making regular stuff for us here at Talk. Shadow Justice Secretary Robert Jenrick will join us for a brand new monthly phone-in, giving listeners the opportunity to quiz him on the issues affecting you. He's going to be in Talk Towers in London from 9 a.m. starting on Tuesday the 21st of October. Robert is going to take questions put to him by you, the listeners. Calls, messages, voice notes. 30 minutes you get to grill him on his opinions on things. It will be a regular phone-in during Morning Glory, of course, with our wonderful Mike Graham during the breakfast show. And he'll be taking the nation's questions live here, the home of common sense. Ring Rob is what it's going to be called. Look at that. I don't know who got paid the big bucks to come up with that name. Brilliant nomenclature there. No less than the best. But you can ring Rob on Talk, 03444991000, or leave a voice note. So there you go. Shadow Justice Secretary Robert Jenrick, the one and only. Soft Hands Rob is what I like to call him, because I once shook his hands and I've never touched such velvety skin in my life. Interesting fact, but he has got very soft hands. Anyway, Mr. Soft Hands Rob is going to be taking your calls, monthly phone-in, 21st of October, that is a Tuesday. It kicks off 30 minutes. You can call him, message him, leave voice notes, whatever. Maybe you can send in a stamped addressed envelope, a postcard, a carrier pigeon could fly by the window. Perhaps you could fly a drone pulling a streamer. Who knows? But there you go. Robert Jenrick is going to be here for Ring Rob, which is kicking off on the 21st of October. I'm looking forward to it. And like I said, you can't come down to studios in person because that would just be hullabaloo. That would be mayhem. So that means you don't get to shake his hand and understand what I mean about the silky paws. There you are. Anyway, shall we have a little look, actually? Because he sort of was warming up. He was doing this sort of a warm-up lap. He was sort of busting some grooves, some shapes, getting the heart rate going in preparation for Ring Rob, because he was on MG this morning.
As I mentioned at the start of the show, you're going to join us for a brand new monthly phone-in called Ring Rob, which starts first one up next Tuesday, 21st of October, around about 9 a.m. You're going to give listeners the opportunity to quiz you on issues that are affecting them. What are you hoping to hear from them?
Well, I always enjoy coming on your show, Mike, and you are the king of common sense. So I'm hoping to get some of your very, very sensible viewers and listeners who call in, and I can actually just learn from what's actually happening out on the streets of our country. What are people's views? And I can try to give frank, honest, candid responses on the issues of the day.
Oh, we love to see it. I love it when old Jenrick gets wound up and gets going. He's like, whee! He doesn't stand for any nonsense. I'm really looking forward to that. So, but be nice to him. Actually, no, don't. Don't, you know, just do what you do to me. You just be honest with him. Be your wonderful, true, gorgeous selves, you wonderful patriots with discerning taste. It's a very exciting new addition to the Talk family. So welcome aboard, Mr. Jenrick. Right, talking about calling in, shall we see who's at the other side of the phone lines right now? Because I've been getting a lot of calls from Birmingham, understandably, given the shocking information that came out from the West Midlands Police yesterday about Tel Aviv fans being banned from attending the football match at Aston Villa because the police don't think they can keep them safe, or according to the mad Islamists, because they're actually terrorists and hooligans. But Sir Keir Starmer has now said he's going to do everything in his power to ensure Jewish people are safe. Let's speak to Ronnie, who is in Birmingham. Hello there, Ronnie.
Hi, Alex.
Hello, my love.
Passion. I'm just phoning about these people ringing into you and messaging you.
All right.
About banning Aston Villa from Europe. It's nothing to do with the football club, it's the police.
Who's been banning Aston Europe from... Aston Europe, sorry. Aston Villa from Europe.
Ban Aston Villa from Europe. It's ridiculous.
Well, it is. I agree with you. No, it is the police. It's not the football club who's decided this. It is West Midlands Police.
Yeah, just go on the official Villa site and you'll see they haven't been granted a safety certificate.
Yeah. No, I know. No, I'm well aware this ain't the football club.
Anyway, apart from that, get the FA to arrange an England-Israel friendly at Villa Park. See how that goes down.
Oh, the problem here, of course, and this is what I was alluding to, talking to Grant Shapps previously, is we saw what happened in Amsterdam a year ago, where the brilliant Andrew Fox said, well, it was pre-organised. They knew that the Jewish fans were coming to town, so they'd been hitting up their little encrypted messaging group saying, come on, let's all get together in Amsterdam and go after them. And it's very clear that that's what the police are worried about now, that it wouldn't just be a little bit of football hooliganism, a little bit of heave-ho between home and away fans, but it instead would be an ideological clash, that it could descend into absolute mayhem and violence, because unfortunately there are people in this country who want to see that come to pass. But no, I agree with you, Ronnie. You can't blame Aston Villa for this. You have to blame successive governments and their politics of appeasement. Ronnie, thank you ever so much for your call. Right, going to take a short break now, but when I gaze through the glass panels into the gallery, I can see a creature there. Oh yeah, I can see the two-fingered hand of that creature. A sort of strange thing that's crawled out from under the floorboards earlier than normal, that's going to stalk into the studios with a little dark cloud above him to bring us some well-deserved misanthropy. Mr. Kevin O'Sullivan, instead of spending 5 minutes trying to open his laptop and moaning and swearing as he fails to be able to connect to Zoom, is here in the flesh. So he's going to be sitting the other side of me just after this.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
There we go, a sort of delayed pause on Talk. Ooh. Then here we are. Here I am. Here's Mr. Kevin O'Sullivan. Hello. Normally that sort of bit of delay before you is because you can't open your laptop on time. But look, here you are.
I have so much trouble with my laptop, I thought I'd better come in personally.
Oh, it's great to have you here. I mean, there's really just one story in town today. I mean, there's lots of stories in town, but there's one that's really dominating the airways for us right now because people are rightfully shocked and horrified by the fact that we've become a Britain that's descended into saying Jews can't go to Birmingham.
This is, in my view, by West Midlands Police and the Birmingham Council Safety Advisory Board, or whatever the hell they're called. I think this is an anti-Semitic decision. If it was Palestine United, I know, difficult concept, I know, but if it was Palestine United or Gaza Athletic who were playing, the West Midland Police would allow them to come, the away fans to come. We know that, it's obvious. And I heard you saying that you can't really blame Aston Villa. Well, they're not at the centre of this decision, and of course it's difficult for Aston Villa if the police say we can't guarantee. Let's tell it like it is. We can't guarantee the safety of Jews if they come to your ground. Aston Villa are put in a difficult position, but my view is this is a moment. This is a big moment in British history. I think Aston Villa should take a stand. I think Maccabi Tel Aviv should take a stand. Both clubs should say to the Europa League and to the West Midlands Police and to the Safety Advisory Board, if you do not allow the Israeli away fans to come into Villa Park, we will not play this match. It's really important, this. And I don't want to hear Keir Starmer. I mean, for a moment this story broke when I was on air last night and the switchboard erupted. And I want to pay tribute to Aston Villa fans. They were furious. Three Aston Villa fans phoned me up to say I will be handing in my season ticket tomorrow. So tribute to the Aston Villa fans who are as disgusted by this as the rest of us. Now, I don't want to hear the Prime Minister saying this is the wrong decision. What are you going to do?
Do something.
What
you
are you
are
going
the Prime
to
Minister.
This is a key moment, Alex. This is a key moment. You know, we've found this hate preacher, this Islamic preacher from Birmingham who was in Amsterdam a few weeks ago saying when the Maccabi Tel Aviv fans come to Birmingham, we must show them no mercy.
I've got the clip. I've got the clip.
We safeguard the vulnerable from any type of exploitation. That is the character of a Muslim, who has a Muslim as a rahmah. Remember, rahmah is in its place. It's in its place. When the Tel Aviv fans come to Birmingham in a few weeks, we will not show them rahmah in Birmingham.
What does he mean by that?
That means mercy. We won't show the visiting Israeli fans any mercy, any hospitality. We will make their life hell. Now, it is true that wherever Tel Aviv fans, Maccabi Tel Aviv fans go, as we saw last year in Amsterdam, they tend to be assaulted and attacked by pro-Palestine hooligans. But that makes it all the more important that they should be protected and they should be allowed to do what other football fans are allowed to do, and that is follow their team around the world. This is a really important issue. And West Midlands Police, it's your job to protect them. Don't tell us you can't protect them. Don't tell us you can't guarantee their safety, because every week in the Premier League there are lots and lots of away fans going to games where the games are local derbies, they're very contentious, violence can easily erupt. They're able to protect the safety of fans in those circumstances. They can do it for the Maccabi fans.
This goes much deeper and it's much darker, because I remember Amsterdam a year ago. I remember the scenes. I did a huge piece on my Substack about it, where I had got access to some of the encrypted conversations that were being had between people going on a Jew hunt. That they were coordinated, that they were bussed in, that this guy is basically already, that imam has put out a call to action, saying if they come here...
To hell with him, to hell with him.
To prison with him.
Yeah. In terms of the Amsterdam scenes that we saw, which were shocking, of course that was first written up that Jewish fans arrived in Holland and went on the rampage. What happened was they arrived in Holland and they were attacked.
But the waiting, prepared, marauding
and that's
horse.
what happens to them everywhere they go. So the implication, or that somehow these people are troublemakers, they're not.
Oh, but this is what they always
do. They
always do the grievance politics. That is the main narrative and playbook of an Islamist, is to say we're the victim and they're the aggressor. Therefore, that justifies our violence against them. That is exactly their playbook that they always use. And what is sending a chill down my spine is actually, I think West Midlands Police are probably right on this, because that lot, those horrible people with those sick, twisted medieval ideologies, do have the ability to phone up everybody around the country and bust them in. You saw when the Manchester airport thugs were initially arrested, and you've got about, a gathering of about 100 of them all standing there with their placards shouting and threatening outside the police station. You saw how they did when it came to the Batley school teacher. They are able to mobilise their followers, their acolytes around the country to all come and be a pretty scary force. And I remember as well, not long ago, the attacks on the synagogue. You know, even the synagogues in New York had to go into lockdown. Everyone thought that this was going to be a big mass coordinated attack. You had the SAS in a helicopter going around. You know, this was taken seriously because I think when it comes to the intelligence agencies, the security services and the police, they realise actually now the threat is huge.
Yeah, I agree with that, but I don't think West Midland Police are right. I think they're profoundly wrong. This is, as I say, a key point in British history, and what the police are for is to enforce basic human freedoms. And these people coming from Tel Aviv to support their team, that is a basic human right, and it is the police's job to allow them to pursue their basic human rights. And by saying, oh, well, we can't really do that, what the West Midlands Police are effectively leading the charge in saying, well, from now on, we can't really keep Jews safe in this country.
I would like to see the people behind this actually having their collars felt. It's one thing if West Midlands Police suddenly go, we don't think we've got the capacity in our force to be able to hold back the tidal wave of evil that is going to all descend upon Birmingham. And Birmingham is a city, when you look at the demographics now, at least 30% of the population of Birmingham is Muslim, and of those 30%, I don't know what percentage have these barbaric views.
In Handsworth.
Well, there you
96%.
go. But they're able to mobilise. But we've seen this before. We saw this during the riots when the police turned round and said to the Muslims coming out of the mosque, go on, lads, put your weapons back in there. Like, don't cause any trouble, please. I think that now we've got to a stage where the people who need to be protecting us against terrorists and extremists are the very ones who are scared of them.
Yeah, and let's talk about these Islamists. Let's talk about that idiot in Amsterdam saying we can't show the Israelis any mercy. Let's talk about this culture. Today, these chilling, sinister pictures have arrived from Kabul. The Taliban are staging their favourite national sport, massive stadiums full of people witnessing executions. A guy who apparently murdered a man and his 8 months pregnant wife obviously deserves punishment, but this is the way they do it, the Taliban. This is the way these devout Muslims do this in that country, that benighted country. They fill a stadium with people like the Roman gladiator, and then the victims stand on the back of a truck with a gun and they shoot the perpetrators through the back of the head. I'm not saying those perpetrators don't deserve punishments, but that is Neanderthal. That is dinosauric. We've got to do something about these people because that culture is infesting this country.
Well, this
now.
is it. We learned just the other day, didn't we, that the Taliban are providing letters to people in Afghanistan to come and invade this country by going, you know, dear Mohammed, we're after you because of your social media, love the Taliban. Pay about 200 quid for that, pay top price, and you get, dear Mohammed, we're going to kill you and your family, love the Taliban. And then they get to come into here because they just put, somehow their passports have all gone, but they've kept that lovely little special printed out letter in a nice plastic wallet as they get in their dinghies and cross the channel and go, oh, look, I should live here now.
Love the Taliban,
Love the Taliban. And they are infiltrating. We are in such a big mess because we need to be turning around and going, no, absolutely not. And instead we're going, do you want a four-star hotel?
Our friend
what
in
street do you want to live in?
Our hate preacher in Amsterdam, for that is what he is. He went on after saying, show the Israelis no mercy when they come to Birmingham. He went on to sort of outline exactly what a wonderful religion Muslims are. You know, we care about people. Everybody is equal under Allah. Oh, unless you happen to be a woman. You know, unless you happen to be a woman over the age of 12 in East London last weekend who fancied going on the local mosque fun run because women over the age of 12 were banned because they are regarded as second-class citizens upon whom we are not even allowed to look. This is medieval claptrap.
It's sick.
Medieval claptrap.
It's sick and it's evil, and unfortunately all the establishment seems to be doing is messing around at the edges to try and control this. It is good though. We've got some breaking news. Apparently Palestine Action's co-founder, no, it's not good news, actually, can proceed with a High Court challenge against the government over the group's ban as a terror organisation. The Court of Appeal has ruled as it has dismissed a Home Office appeal. It's bad news. So actually, Palestine Action's co-founder is now going to take the government to court, us will be paying for that, to say that they shouldn't be prescribed because all the lefty lawyers, they love it.
And do you know what the result of that case will be? the ban will be lifted. This will be a deal between the judge, the court and the government, because the government is in a right fix over this. You know, I'm probably besmirching the judge there, but this is the way this works in Starmer's Britain. The courts do the government's bidding, and I bet you they overturn the Palestine action ban. I'll guarantee you.
I don't even, you know, I feel I need to start investing in some hijabs and some burqas and some prayer mats right now,
Yeah,
because I feel like the writing's on the wall and it goes from right to left.
Yeah.
And I can't read it, unfortunately. But no, it is shocking. And then on top of all of this, what we have as well, when we were talking about, you know, dear Mohammed, you're in trouble, love the Taliban, and now look, a terrorist is in the country, and we know that plenty of people who have come into the country both legally and illegally share the sentiments of some of these malign hostile states. But we just have a Home Office that is failing to do anything about this.
Yeah, exactly right. By the way, we learnt today that the one in, one out scheme at the Home Office, there are 12 civil servants running it. 12? It's ridiculous. But when you say about the Taliban making money selling these silly love letters, the Taliban threatened to kill me. Oh, OK, you can stay here forever, have some benefits. Here's a free house. Mainly, the Taliban make money by selling the world heroin. That's what they mainly do.
Well, yeah, no, they sell a lot of drugs. They do the heroin, but actually they've realised that people trafficking makes even more cash than the business of false documents. The people trafficking, actually, you know, moving people from one country to another, now providing the special letters. And actually, we need to pay attention to them. It's all very going, oh, Taliban, that is so like 2002. No, it is so 2025, because when the Americans pulled out, they left a massive cache of weapons, about 50,000 arms. And have you seen what they're up to now? The Taliban, so armed are they, so emboldened are they, they've been lying in wait and building their caliphate in Afghanistan with Al-Qaeda 2.0, who terrify me to the bone.
Yep.
They are now big enough and scary enough that they're launching a war against Pakistan. They started invading Pakistan, a nuclear power, for crying out loud.
Well,
they're not just sitting there growing some poppies.
Yeah. I mean, we are reaching sort of critical mass here, a crisis point in terms of the Islamification of Britain. You know, you have to say, I know this sounds like a cliche, but you have to say at this point, because it's right, that most Muslims are decent, ordinary people like the rest of us, just trying to keep a roof over their head, feed the kids, you know, and get through life like the rest of us. But there is this extremist clique, a very noisy, powerful extremist clique who mean us harm. They want to take us over, and they're winning because we have an establishment, a political establishment that are terrified of them. Why did Keir Starmer recognise Palestine? Because he wants the Muslim vote. Why hasn't he, 5 months after saying there will be an inquiry, a public inquiry into the worst sex scandal in British history, the rape gang scandal, why hasn't it started? Oh, we can't find the chairman. I mean, you can't find a chairman who won't be nice to Muslims.
This
That's
is the thing. If we're talking about the fact, I mean, there's been a recent attitude survey done on the British Muslim population. About 30 to 40% of them would support Sharia law in Britain.
Exactly right.
But which is still a significant proportion, but that does mean
coming.
60 to 70% do not. But the problem is, it's a bit like cancer. You wouldn't find a couple of cancer cells and go, it's just a couple of cells, the rest of the body's healthy. You have to get it out before it metastasises. Yeah. And what is happening is, it's very clear it is metastasising. And that this small entity of the extremists, backed by foreign money, largely part of the Muslim Brotherhood network, are using their influences, setting up shell companies, charities, these sort of, you know, the community leaders that you love so much, faith schools, sports clubs, all the rest of it. And
by
they
the way,
are...
one more thing, 85 Sharia councils.
Right.
And these are basically 85 Sharia law courts. They don't sort of sit in judgment about thievery, but they sit in judgment about everything. 85.
But they are now grooming and
coming.
radicalising the Muslim population in this country. And when you see, you know, when you've got these pro-Gaza MPs saying, oh, we've got a petition, don't let the Jews come, and then it comes to pass, you realise they know how to play the game.
Exactly right.
Right, we're going to take a short break now. You're going to stay in for the calls after the break?
Why not?
Yeah, there you go. After the break, you can phone Alex and Kev, cross-talk. Here we go.
Back again.
Right, back again. So, yeah, go on. 0344 499 1000 is the number to dial, and we're looking forward to chatting to you as Kev runs to find an earpiece. We'll see you after this.
I'm not.
They're making a mess of things. They don't know what they're doing. They're incompetent. They're doing the wrong policies. But I think the real reason is because they've been thinking about how do we deal with Nigel Farage. Nigel Farage is going to be taking all our seats with Reform UK. They're going to be breaking down the red wall. And so they're thinking, they thought about, oh, well, let's stand close to him. Let's try and out Farage. And then they've settled on trying to just attack him and blame Brexit and blame him for everything in the hope that they'll shore up some of their support if and when there's going to be an election.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Hello, look, Kev's still here. Time to take your calls.
Cool Kev and Alex.
Cool Kev and Alex, yeah. I like that.
Never mind Robert Jenrick, eh?
Yeah, forget that. This is better.
This is miles better than that.
This is, of course it is. Soft hands Jenrick. Well, callousy hands Phillips
We'll get
here.
fired now, won't we?
Basically, you're always about 1 minute away from us. I think it's why they don't let us play together anymore, because, my God.
It's dangerous.
We actively encourage each other to go far too fast. Anyway, let's see how far and fast we can
let's
go.
Do it.
With the help of Nigel, who's in London. Hi, Nigel.
Good afternoon, guys.
Hi, Nigel.
I'm appalled. Hi, Kevin.
Yeah.
I'm appalled by this decision by the police in Birmingham, and it's nothing short of state-sponsored anti-Semitism.
Exactly what I said last night on air, Nigel. That's exactly, literally those words. This is state-sponsored anti-Semitism, and it's got to be stopped.
Well, two minds think alike. And you know what, Kevin and Alex? This is absolutely shocking to say that a group of people can't go somewhere for fear of being attacked. It's like saying, if you don't like certain football fans in South East London, because of your skin colour, you might get attacked. It's absolutely nonsense. At the end of the day, police have a job to protect people and property. If this person who's the chief constable can't do it, then they need to go and find another job.
Actually, I tell you, the Prime Minister could use all sorts of methods and tactics, couldn't he? And one thing that I think is shocking is we just had the Labour Party conference, didn't we? Yep. Where Starmer and the rest of them are all briefed to talk about, you know, reform being Nazis, fascists and far-right thugs. Out they came how dangerous they are, how wicked they are, how they're racist, how they're intolerant, how they're evil. Completely baseless accusations. And yet, where are those words coming out of his mouth condemning these Gaza MPs who are now going absolutely tonto on social media? They're emboldened. They're saying all sorts of stuff. And I don't see him standing at a lectern saying those pro-Gazan MPs are dangerous, they're backwards, they're anti-Semitic.
Can I just say one other thing, that it is a standing and continuing absolute disgrace that no one in this government, Keir Starmer, his cabinet or anyone else, has to this day conceded that the person who committed the synagogue atrocity, what was it now, 2.5 weeks ago, was a Muslim, was an Islamist terrorist. They still haven't said it.
Yeah. The other thing is I wonder how many doors will be knocked on by the social media policing teams of this country, by the dealing with the very nasty, vile, filthy, abhorrent messages that are being published.
I know they won't. This is the thing. It is two-tier justice. For some reason, we're too scared in this country. Even when I was speaking to Grant Shapps, who was actually brilliant earlier on, he talked about certain people. And I wanted to sort of say to him, what do you mean by certain people?
I mean, give it up.
Call them by their names.
Yeah.
They are Islamists. You get to use that word. I think they were worried about being Charlie Hebdo'd. Nigel, thank you ever so much. You know, that's quite sinister, isn't it? But I think people are. Guys, look, everyone's here today now. You've got Ian Collins in the studio, Kev. It's like,
Three Stooges, here we are.
What's going to go? Should all three of us take a call? I mean, you don't have an earpiece in yet, do you?
I don't, so I can't hear anything.
So you're just going to have to sort of...
which is always good.
Yeah, you're going to have to do your best as we quickly speak to Richard in Oxfordshire. We don't have much time, Richard, but what's on your mind?
All right, then. I'll make it very quick. Morning, afternoon, guys.
Hello, Richard.
Speak to you all.
Hiya.
Right, yeah, very quickly. I've got a friend who is Jewish and he's actually a season ticket holder for Aston Villa. He goes along with his son and occasionally his dad to watch the game. Firstly, I did speak with him very quickly, and he said it's basically down to the vocal supporting MP who's in the centre of all of this, and he thinks, and this is his own words, he thinks it's more of a play on the Muslim behaving people than what it is on the fans. So what he's trying to say is that it's like the fans will probably be the ones who are being well behaved, and the local folks are going to be the ones who are going to come out and attack.
Well, no, exactly. This is what they seem to be doing. You know, this is, again, it's the grievance politics, it's the network, and this happened in Amsterdam. Yeah. When they all said, the Tel Aviv fans are coming, come on, come all of you Jew-hating Islamists, why don't you all come and launch a conjoined attack? And that is exactly what I think the police are worried about, trying to police. Richard, thank you ever so much. Mr. Collins, put your phone down.
I'm sure you've heard, this is not fun. You sound like a nan when you say that. You know,
have you got a call? You want to take it?
It's not full. Hang on a sec, yeah. All right, gorgeous. Yeah. How you doing?
Yeah.
Yeah, all right.
What's his name then?
That's Zara Sultan on the phone. Oh, so Ian, I mean, look, what's coming up? Before it descends into absolute